the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What's a pity? Tomorrow never certain. What dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come get it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come get it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Case Closed, the highest level conversations on the most relevant topics on this side of YouTube. 4 p.m. every Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And apologies for the tardiness. I did not, daylight savings time. You get the picture, right? And I am not in the States. We don't do that stuff over here in the dusty continent where I'm currently situated, if you will, where I'm currently located. So apologies for that. But today we have a all-star panel as usual. Okay, we have the dusty guy Zorin, who refuses to use his camera since forever, even though he keeps promising. We got LAR movement in the building. We got Mr. IC3. We may be joined by Dr. Thunder. And as you come in, go ahead and click that like button. Click the share button. All right. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, about the run on the bank that recently happened, okay? And we're going to be taking this, we're going to try to put a fresh perspective on it, not just for the sake of putting a fresh perspective, but I think it's a relevant one, okay? So let me just lay down some basic thoughts down. So we have Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, and it's been taken over by the FDIC as a result of a run on the bank, whereby a liquidity problem transformed into an insolvency problem. Silicon Valley Bank holds 50%, that's half of venture capital funds, and also a lot of startups keep their money in there. So you're talking about the tip of the spear. This is not big tech.
Yeah, so I think the Ghanaian internet decided to fail a little bit. Yeah, so
okay.
Silicon, with the Silicon Bank, one of the issues over here, obviously, is they have actually collapsed. That means the finance situation has reached to a point whereby the bank cannot actually be allowed to function under the banking license in America. So one of the issues, obviously, Ike was talking about is, well, how did this actually come to be? How did we get to this situation? Is it going to be similar to the 2008 crash? Is it similar to the Sam Bankman-Friedman situation? Like, how is it? My thoughts are, obviously, if we know some of the basic facts are that the bank obviously was actually buying safe U.S. Treasury bonds. It's not like it was actually doing something crazy compared to other banks, like what happened in 2008, whereby you're giving out loans to anyone and anyone. You're not really checking through and making sure that everything is, going through the right ways. No, this time they're doing the right thing. They're buying normal bonds. The issue is, in my cases, from my research, is that a lot of the banking managers, they were putting too much of the money into bonds. And then what happened is too many people tried to take the money out immediately. And of course, when that happened, that's where the crash actually happened. The bank is taking your money. The money's going in and doing other things like trying to build value. The bank is trying to get interest, right, from the money that you put in. And of course, it doesn't make sense for it just to stay there. So they invested it into bonds. But of course, when they weren't able to sell the bonds at the appropriate price, they noticed people taking the money out. They start selling the bonds at a loss. They realize they can't control the effect. Now, obviously the FDA actually still puts a $250,000 kind of insurance on your money. But if a lot of these money is coming to from venture capitalists or let's say startups, it might be over millions, right? So if that's the case, it's not really going to help them that much over there. So yeah, Mr. IC3 over there, I think I came back.
Yeah, how long have I been? How long have I been down? Sorry.
You've been down since you used to be a brother, man.
I've been down since I came up. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the camera, but it might be an issue, even though it seems to be coming in clearly. I don't know why I got dropped off. Everything seems to be working well. But let me try again. Okay, I was talking about the fact that Silicon Valley Bank is holds 50% of venture capital funds. Did I cut? I guess nobody heard me say that. I was talking to myself. Okay, Silicon Valley Bank owns 50% of venture capital funds. So we're talking about billions of dollars frozen, thousands of companies affected, tens of thousands of employees might not be getting paid because these thousands of companies are not going to be making their payroll, right? So while this is a regional bank, it is number 16 out of the close to 5,000 banks in the United States. So it's a big deal. And also it does represent the tip of the spear when it comes to technological investors and inventors. So we're not talking about big tech here. This is not about Google or Facebook. This is about the next Google and the next Facebook. Some people right now are working on AI and in the biotech sector, or maybe they're working on environmental technology, battery technology, or maybe they're like Kaizo working on something in the blockchain. Who knows, right? But this is the tip of the spear when it comes to American competitiveness against China and other competitors in the technological sector. So that's why this is a big deal. Now, I want to take I want to take a step back, okay? Because we've been talking on this very show about some of the contexts surrounding this. When 2023 came around, if you remember, LAR, we were talking about the layoffs in the tech sector. We're talking about, hey, is this what's next, right? We make some projections. What's going to happen next, okay? And here we are. Some more stuff is happening next. Is this a canary in the coal mine? Is this a harbinger of things to come? So let me talk about something, and I want to play a quick video here, and I want to start getting reactions, and it's about the employment picture. Unemployment is at 3.6%, which is phenomenal. Great number, right? 3.6%. However, it's the non-college educated people that actually have great employment situation right now. In other words, college educated, the information workers, as they are sometimes called, are not doing very well. This is nothing new. Okay, we've been knowing for forever that people are going to college and getting BS degrees in sociology and criminal justice and psychology or whatever, and then they work at Chipotle. They got Chipotle in Texas, LAR, or whatever you guys do over there. Some Tex-Mex joint or something like that. Yeah, you go. They work at Chipotle. Okay, they're baristas at Starbucks. We know the overused cliche, the well-worn cliche, and it is because it is true. The point is, rather than us emphasizing skill, say, go get a skill, we say, go to college. And we know most people are sheep, they're lemmings, they're going to take the path of least resistance. They're just going to go to college because they were told to go to college. They don't go to college to be an engineer that can engineer, a coder that actually codes. They're going to college and they're hoping to get into some job and then hoping to become a manager somewhere or somehow, whatever that means, right? Managing what? Why? They don't think of things as actually meaning something. It's just, I check a box, I get a piece of paper, and then I get ushered into some assembly line, and then I get bumped up after I do my tenure type of deal, right? But let me go ahead and play this. This is a shout out to Mike Green, okay? And let me go ahead and go full screen with this, even though I think I just messed it up. Let me go backwards here.
Today's show is brought to you by Public.com. You'll be hearing more about.
They have been.
Let's see.
Right, and now you're facing a situation in restaurant. Well,
and basically, what he's going to emphasize here is the employment picture.
With that narrative.
Well, I think that there's always elements of truth in any narrative, right? And so there are components of the labor market that are exceptionally strong. If you need to get somebody to change a bedpan in a nursing home, you're going to really struggle. If you need to find somebody to work at a fast food restaurant or a gasoline station, you're going to really struggle because candidly, they're difficult jobs to fill under normal conditions, right? And now you're facing a situation in which the quantity of individuals that are looking for that type of employment have been reduced dramatically. So those with less than high school education have fallen sharply in the labor force. I could pull it up in a second to look at the absolute numbers, but that's broadly been falling since the mid-1990s. Those who have less than a college degree began falling around the global financial crisis. Now we're actually watching a situation where the increases in unemployment, the decreases in real wages that are occurring on a nearly record level, indicating surplus, are happening primarily amongst information workers, those with college degrees, who would historically have been protected from this type of dynamic.
So real wages not going up for those with college degrees. Employment or unemployment is actually high for those with college degrees, or underemployment. Well, let's begin with LAR here. Okay. So what are your thoughts here? People are talking about UBI and all this other kind of stuff, but shouldn't we be talking about skills, about building things, as opposed to, oh, now I guess there's no jobs for me, so you should give me income? What are people doing? People have abandoned the trades, but actually right now the trades can pretty much name their price, right? The trades are doing great. What are your thoughts about this thing, which we've already known for a while, but we're now seeing emphasized in many different ways? And obviously it is related to the layoffs at Meta and the layoffs that are going to be happening in the startup industry as well. But what are your thoughts here? Is there any hope for these overly colleged people?
There's going to be a lot of educational mercenaries, because at the end of the day, like, if the bank just run out of money or the banks fail at their job, it also affects people's payroll. Because if I got my money in your bank and you go under, I'm only insured by FDIC to what? $250,000, right? So you're gonna ruin my whole payroll. So this is one, and the reason I say that is because do not believe a business will not say that as a way to lay you off before, anyways. Like, we don't know if we can. We don't know if we got our money over here, but we don't know how it's going to work. They just lost this. Well, we can't afford to pay you. Move on. The skills trades are great. Having a trade is great when you're in an environment where people can pay you for your labor. But if you're taking the floor out of people being able to pay people with skills for their labor, now you got an issue. Like that's one of the issues with contractors. People don't want to pay contractors because they might do half of the job and leave and take the money. And sometimes contractors don't want to do work because guess what? They don't know if they're going to get paid all the way. So now you put people in this conundrum where, what are we going to do? Now you're going to have multiple hustles. And I think it's bad because of when you brought up Bankman-Fried, is it Bankman-Fried?
Sam Bankman-Fried.
Thank you, Sam Bankman-Fried. And then in this bank, and I forgot something happened prior to that. And even going all the way back to Enron, these are the people who are supposed to be smart enough to make sure the money is right. And they keep messing it up. Because the banks had to be bailed out a long time ago. So you mean to tell me, they made movies about bankers and institutions making bad business moves that affected everybody already. So at this point, and you're talking about Silicon Valley, basically. So you mean to tell me you messing with their money too? That's the information hub. So, so now people got to be smart enough. And it sounds crazy, but I already know it sounds crazy. That's why they bring up UBI. But now people got to be smart enough to only put so much faith in banks. Mm-hmm. Like, I know a couple of Black athletes and entertainers that they thought was crazy last year by saying, oh, I got like 75, 100 bank accounts. Why would you do that? Because I'm only insured to $250,000. Why? What? I don't want to get all my money taken. Mm-hmm. So now, this is what this creates.
Yeah, 100%. And if you're a couple, you get up to 500,000, right? And then, but when you have these businesses, yes, you're correct. Small businesses, a lot of them kind of put their money in different bank accounts, right? So this is gonna have many ramifications, implications, and ripple effects. And we'll talk specifically. We'll drop some more information as we go along here regarding exactly how this happened. It's never quite the same thing. It's not as bad as what Lehman Brothers did. Some people are the depositors for sure didn't do anything wrong, right? The people who just put their money in the bank there, and running payroll through there, and even the bank itself did something rather silly in terms of risk management, but not as bad as some other things from the past. But Kaizo, on this point of college education, right? What are your thoughts regarding the fact that a lot of people go to college, but the employment market in that sector is actually not strong? Where employment is actually strong is in the lower end. And that is actually part of why we're seeing a lot of inflation, is because it's what is called service inflation, meaning the people that you pay for your hospitality or to deliver your food and all those kinds of things have a higher cost. They can name their price. Hence, there's a lot of inflationary pressure on prices as a result of the wage pressures on the lower end. Meanwhile, college educated people are working at Chipotle. You're a physics PhD. How do you see the whole thing? How are you able to still have marketable skills? Or how do you view this? Or did you ever feel like, oh, I'm entitled? I go to college, I check a box, I get a job, and then I get promoted or whatever. Or what are your thoughts about the fact that high-end college educated people are the ones that are actually suffering in this recession, where typically it affects the lower end?
Right. I think you use the words like high-end college education. I think it's just
Yeah,
college,
sorry, whatever. Go ahead.
right? 'Cause I think the high-end college educated people can easily find a job, right? Because there's something for them. But yeah, anyways, I think generally when it comes to these kinds of things, is, as you said, the economy and the demand. At some point, the economy kind of reaches a saturation point of so-called intellectuals, because the value that they're adding on to the market is no longer being seen and felt. What's actually being felt right now is the fact that there's a lack of actually saturation in the lower end of the field, right? Skilled carpenters, I'm sure, service men, for example. If you look at DoorDash, right? If you're trying to get like Uber Eats or something, there's usually some crazy amount of tip you're going to pay, up to like $4. Some people pay $10, right? Because while a lot of these people, when they see $0 donation on the tips, they won't do the job. They won't accept the job, right? Or if they keep being given that much zero donations, they just remove themselves from using the app. So right now, yes, there is a point whereby it's a lack of saturation of skilled and unskilled labor force, because that's what's missing, right? Your food's got to get to your door. You've been used to not going to the restaurant and eating your food there. Someone's got to deliver it to you. Someone's got to come and clean your paveways, right? All these jobs that we're seeing them all over TikTok. People are just becoming extremely rich, earning like $60,000 a year on basically doing people's lawns, washing them, the roof tilings. We've gotten lazy. The issue here is, right, these college educated people have gotten to a point whereby they have become reliant on very actually basic stuff on other people. And right now, those people know, hey, look, my market, or rather my value in this market economy, is no longer at the bottom, right?
100%, 100%.
And one last point I forgot is, and obviously when it comes to PhDs and masters and stuff, is that the economy has not grown to facilitate the numbers of people actually being graduated in these fields. The honest truth is, the economy, there's too many educated people, so-called college educated people, and the economy is not grown to accommodate them. So it's a simple maths problem.
100%. And the tip of the spear with regards to the growth of the economy, the growth of the economy, typically there are two ways in which it happens, generally speaking. Okay, you have demographics and you have technology. Demographics just means you have a bunch of young people, and there's only so many ways you can do that. Number one is by importing people, immigration, or you're just lucky to have a young demographic at the particular time. And these things happen in cycles. There's nothing China can do right now about the fact that it is aging. There's nothing it can do. There's nothing you can do about demographics. So what do you have to do then? Another option, as I said, is technology, which is basically a way of doing more with less. Technology, you can just think of as efficiency, Okay, when you get more efficient, you improve battery technology, you improve energy technology. Oh, boom! Now you can grow. You can grow the pie, and you kind of employ more people. Now, I want to read here what Mark Zuckerberg has to say about this same thing. Not only are people deciding that, oh, I can just go to college, but they're also thinking that they think that the natural progression should be that they should become managers. Okay, so every A player in the team, wants to be promoted to become a manager, and then you build a team around him. Okay, and those people in the team that are underneath the A player, some other A player is going to emerge, and he wants to become a manager as well. So basically, it reads here, San Francisco Tribune, January 10th, says, after sacking 11,000 employees, which is no big deal, by the way. They should have removed more. They can still afford to remove way more from Facebook and still run just fine. After sacking 11,000 employees in November last year, Meta founder and CEO Mark Zuckerberg has now reportedly put middle managers, yes, you know the type, middle managers in the company on notice. According to the newsletter Command Line by the Verge's Alex Heath, Zuckerberg warned managers at a recent all-hands meeting. He says this: I don't think you want a management structure that's just managers managing managers, managing managers, managing managers, managing people doing the work. Basically, this glut of middle management, this dense, thick glut of middle managers, because there's this intense pressure to promote people to management, meaning they're not working anymore. So there's the last layer here, people doing the work. Okay, and then you have managers managing managers, managing managers, managing managers. Okay, he's talking internally to the company, so they know what he's saying, and you know what he's saying, and these are part of the college educated people who may perhaps were lucky enough to actually land a job at Meta. Okay, so Mr. IC3, what do you think, generally speaking, about the idea of tracking? People want to be tracked. They want to get into a particular line. They say, get college. Okay, you check that box. I got college. Okay, now I'm supposed to go into this place and then I'm going to become a manager, right? Isn't that what it's supposed to be? What do you mean managers are useless? Okay, what are your general thoughts about this idea now? Again, the whole backdrop being that the economy is hot for the lower end, but college educated people, not so much, especially when they don't have an actual skill, a marketable, transferable skill. Instead, they're just managers. And this is going to continue with this breakup of the bank and whatnot. But go ahead.
Yes, well, I've had a lot of debates actually with my Jewish challenges, I should say, on forums about the concept of the management class. Yeah, management class. So basically, the idea of moving manufacturing away from America or from the West, and this is just my gut feeling. I don't know if how accurate it is, but moving manufacturing away from the West to the East. Okay, so if you're doing that, then you want the East and other places to be the manufacturers, the people that are doing the handiwork. And then, then the West would be a management class. The West itself becomes a management entity. So therefore, if you're moving manufacturing away from the West, and you're then you would want to focus on management and being the best and having the best system. So you would become the management class of the world, as it were. Yeah, you become the management class of the world. Therefore, with that view towards the future, you would then start investing in management technologies and so on, because you're aspiring to be the management class, the rulers of the world, the world police.
What do you feel about the sustainability of that? Because we can tell, like, if you don't have to be a business owner to just be able to see, like, I don't need all these goddamn managers when the people in the Philippines are doing the work, or when somebody remotely, maybe in Omaha, even in the United States, but they're working remotely somewhere in a cheap part of the country. I can just give them the work. Why do I need managers managing managers? Shout out to Game Changer in the chat. He says he has 8 bosses. So go ahead. Is this a sustainable thing, or it was just a trick and then you cut off the middle managers and obviously only the top people remain?
I think it's a trick, definitely. I would agree with him, definitely, because and so those people, whoever the people were who decided to move manufacturing to the east, right, they must have foreseen this happening, but they had to sell the idea of becoming the supreme management class to the people, so they wouldn't get so much resistance. That's how I feel about that.
100%. And I mentioned technology earlier, and shout out to Hakeem. Okay, thank you very much for the $5 super chat. You say no words there, just $5. Very much appreciated. Above the super chat, you do say shout out to King Ike. I am the king. I will not be. Anyways, so the technology aspect of this, which basically says, okay, cool, because there's an aspect which says, okay, you can manufacture my stuff and I can sustain myself if I am the tip of the spear with regards to inventing new things, right? I'm going to come up with new things, right? I'm going to be the research and development arm of the world, okay? That makes sense. To be the managerial arm of the world, you're going to get your head chopped off. It can only be sustained with 0% interest and quantitative easing. As we're seeing, when the liquidity got pulled away from the market, that's when all these heads are rolling. And Mark Zuckerberg is like managers, which kind of begs the question: didn't all this happen under your watch? Didn't all this managing? Where did they come from? Like, I wonder. Didn't you know why this whole thing was metastasizing under your watch? And to that particular point, Google, okay, did something, and on all these tech companies, you know, they pay some of these people like $400,000 a year. I mean, Google pays some people $4 million, maybe like a couple million in cash, and then stock options or whatever. And specific people whom could have been their competitors in certain sectors. Let's say it's the AI sector or some other thing, because there are lots of people, smart people in Silicon Valley looking to go do their startups. That's their thing, right? So Google, for the past years, while they had Google can do it too, because they legitimately have a money printing machine as a business, right? Not many businesses are as profitable as Google. Google is just, they don't know what to do with their money. So they can afford to just gather up all these people, right? And give them money to kill their dreams, give them golden handcuffs, as they said. You can't leave when you're just like a middle-level engineer, you're getting $275,000. You know, why bother? You know, like, it's really nice, $275,000 to work for somebody else where it's a great campus and you get all your other needs met as well, and everything's open 24/7, and you know, it's got all that kind of stuff, right? So they created this particular situation, right? Mark Zuckerberg created the managers, and now he's cutting it off. He's pulling back, obviously, because of the interest rate situation, but they're making it sound like it was something that, you know, just kind of happened to them. But let me go ahead and continue this video here. And again, to remind the audience, we're talking about Silicon Valley Bank. We're talking about Silicon Valley Bank, and Silicon Valley Bank got collapsed. Well, collapsed and it got taken over by the FDIC as a result of a run on the bank. It holds 50% of all venture capital funds, and more than 50% perhaps of the of startups keep their money in there. Okay, so we're talking billions of dollars frozen, thousands of companies, hundreds of thousands of employees that may not be able to get paid and whatnot. But there's an economic backdrop behind all of this, and we're talking about the employment picture with regards to the fact that the employment situation is great when you're not college educated, as a matter of fact, and not so great when you're college educated, including this high-end jobs of managers, as we heard recently as we just read from Mark Zuckerberg, are not doing very well. So let me go ahead and play the second part here of share this tab. And our friend here, Mike Green, continuing his talk about the fact that the economy is great for the lower end, but not so great for the higher end. Let me play, go.
And what are the consequences of that? If, you know, for the most of our lifetimes, your recession hits lower income folks the hardest, what are the consequences now that it's reversed right now?
Well, I think this is going to be the really interesting question is that we don't entirely know, right? So theoretically, you should have greater flexibility in obtaining employment once you have a college degree. You become, you know, it's called a general purpose education in terms of the information world. But the reality is that we operated under a constrained labor supply environment for those with college educations for an extended period of time. That largely changed in the last generation and has given rise to an increase in what's called underemployment. You graduate from college, you think that you're joining the ranks of the professional class, and you suddenly find that the job opportunities are significantly less than you would have expected. 2 decades ago or 3 decades ago, it would have been nearly unfathomable that you graduate from college and have to go to work at Chipotle. Suddenly that becomes
I told you,
LAR,
Chipotle, he said it.
and have to go to work at Chipotle. Suddenly that
that's the
becomes
spot.
a little bit more normal, right? Or you become a barista at Starbucks, etc. Historically, that was very unusual. It's now become increasingly common. But broadly speaking, what you would expect to see as you face a surplus of knowledge workers is longer and longer periods of unemployment. And we've seen this, the median duration of unemployment has been rising in every recession that we've seen over the last 40 years. This suggests that it's becoming harder and harder for people who have those types of jobs to find replacements at equivalent levels. The example I'm highlighting for people right now is that the median employee at Google that's being laid off, my understanding is, has a compensation package somewhere in the neighborhood of $275,000. Right? That's a phenomenal job. Finding a replacement for that is going to be quite difficult. We're not seeing those layoffs show up in things like unemployment claims because, candidly, if you're receiving severance compensation, as Google employees are, and you were getting paid $275,000, the level of unemployment benefits in the state of California, the maximum that you can obtain, not on a monthly basis or a weekly basis, but in total for a stint of unemployment, is around $13,000. Right. So for a Google employee who was making $275,000 and is now receiving severance that is roughly the same as that compensation, they have very little incentive to actually hit that unemployment line in the way that prior generations who might have been coming off of an assembly line or being unemployed from the leisure industries, a housekeeper, et cetera. Those are the individuals that would historically have been prepared to immediately hit the unemployment claims. We're just not seeing that this time. It's
Exactly. So, and by the way, this is Mr. Mike Green. Okay, one of the smartest, kind of real, intuitive, shall we say, hedge fund managers / kind of
Do they all
commentators.
change their name to Green because it's of money? Robert Green, Mike Green, I don't know.
Yeah, or maybe all that kind of stuff. But no, but this is a legit dude. I'm sure you can tell, Kaizo, and he's kind of supremely arrogant too. I love that shit. Like I like a smart, arrogant person that knows what they're talking about and has proven it with dollars in the bank, MFR. So, Dr. Thunder, Dr. Thunder. Okay, so we are talking about the fact that college-educated people, nothing new here, are working at Chipotle. We're talking about the fact that Mark Zuckerberg said that he does not want to have a situation where it's just managers managing the people who are doing the actual work. The thick layer of middle management, which because of all this pressure to promote people into management and create a team around them, because people just think that that's what you're supposed to do. I'm supposed to become a manager, right? I'm supposed to go to college, right? So the question to you, Dr. Thunder, you're a college professor, okay? So is college obsolete? Okay, what should we be emphasizing skills as opposed to like trades, etc., as opposed to the generic college degree? Because if you told people get a skill, obviously you can go to college and get a skill. But you tell people go to college, you're just going to take the path of least resistance and you'll get a sociology degree, a criminal justice degree, a psychology degree, which doesn't do anything for anybody, right? So is college obsolete? What kind of models can how would it change, or how should it change? Because it's not working economically for these people.
Yeah, I don't know, my voice sounds like I'm not feeling that great. So if I'm a little less clear than I usually am, then that'll be right. But anyhow, yeah, so in colleges, there's this idea of broadening the mind. right? And so, and broadening the mind is separate from skills, being imparted the skills necessary to work a particular job. Those are two different they're two different things. Now, in some degree programs, both of those things are accomplished. So you have, like, for instance, professional schools. You have in schools of music, the closest thing to a professional school is like a BME, Bachelor of Music Education. And the school I work at places close to 100% of the successful graduates and those that get their licensure and everything, close to 100% in an actual job. Okay, so there are a few programs like this in colleges and universities, but there's not as many. And then the question is, do you need to spend as much money as you're spending on tuition and on room and board and everything else, just so that you can say that you had the college experience?
I'm sorry,
Or
Dr. Thunder, I just have to say there's been no other market where there's been such a ridiculous inflation. If you just track the inflation in college tuition from the 70s,
Yeah.
while simultaneously drastic drop in the actual product in terms of like the actual job or whatever it is that college, think of it as an insurance policy. You're not supposed to fall through the cracks of society if you get this stuff. That's not working, and the tuition is going up and people keep buying it. Anyways, go ahead.
And we have the same issue in the academia that you were talking about, as far as like promotion of middle management and just in upper administration in general, where they're getting fat checks, and the people that are actually delivering the product, the education, and creating the curriculum and recruiting the students, often is the case is that they are having to like take another job, take a second job, take a third job. Now I'm a tenured professor and I make a good salary. And I work at a school that has is one of the higher salaries for the position I'm in, right? As an associate professor. Okay. Now I could argue that I've been underpaid for a long time based on what my job responsibilities actually are. But with respect to the general associate professor label, I do all right. And one of the benefits of doing the professor thing is, you get your summers to engage in research. I'm a musician, so I just actually got done playing a concert with a band I play with frequently. That's a subscription series with a guest artist, first-rate guest artist every time. And it's like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday kind of thing. And then of course there's rehearsals too. So I have a flexible schedule. So fine. I remember when I was in, I think I had just finished my master's degree, or maybe I was first or second year in my master's degree. And there was a really great trombone player that was one of our top players in the program. So this is back when I did my schooling up in Michigan, Western Michigan University. Really, really strong trombone player, and he was a graduate student, and he was a full assistantship, right? And he was doing gigs and stuff around town, but it was a really small town. It's really a college town, so there wasn't as much work. But one time, and I think this was with my first. This was probably with my first wife. We went out to a restaurant, and I saw him waiting tables.
Hey.
And he came over to us and he said, "Yep, it's this bad." And that was way back, 2000, 99, 2000, 2001, and that sort of range of time. So it already was a thing. Now it is getting much more so a thing. So anyhow, I think that trade schools for many are going to be the option that makes more sense, and because it's less expensive, you're more focused on the skills that you need to acquire. Frequently, I have told students that have come to study with me, I have encouraged them to change their degree, because some of them will come and say, "Hey, I want to be a performance major," and I usually encourage them to change to a Bachelor of Music Education, because you can get the knowledge that you want if you're a good student and you're assertive, you have a good relationship with the professors and stuff. You can get the information that you want without necessarily being a performance major, and you can put yourself through a certain amount of rigor without without the need for being a performance major. But once you finish as a BME, then you actually have a job. And there's a number of quite notable jazz musicians that was their path. Cannonball Adderley, for instance, he was BME. If you don't know who Cannonball Adderley is, do a Google search. Very important jazz saxophonist. He's sort of the precursor to smooth jazz, as it were. All of the guys that sort of go that direction. But Cannonball could actually play, though. Anyhow, yeah, that's my dig at smooth jazz guys. And then there is another guy, a friend of mine. His name's Jeff Coffin, and Jeff is a great saxophone player. He went to North Texas. He did BME, and Jeff, for 15 years now, has been the saxophone player in the Dave Matthews Band. The original saxophonist in the band passed away, and when he was not doing well health-wise, Jeff started playing in the band. And Jeff also has been, he's won Grammys and all like this. One of the bands he played in also has won Grammys, called Bela Fleck and the Flecktones. But all stuff that's Googleable, stuff that you can check out. But I think my point is, no, school is not necessary. It's necessary for a short list of jobs that require those degrees. We do need to have this philosophical talk about how much is broadening your mind worth, especially if you're juxtaposing it against actually developing the skills necessary to actually be placed in the job of your choosing.
Yes, 100%. Especially if you're a freaking vegetable whose mind is not worth broadening. By the way, I got to bring in the hierarchy and the because let's not pretend like created equal. Yes, in the eyes of God, yes, of course. But Mike V. Okay?
But in the eyes of Ike, no.
But in the eyes of Ike, no. Many vegetables out there. Okay, so Mike V. Okay, we have the backdrop of Silicon Valley Bank collapsing, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty of those kinds of things about regarding what exactly it is that they did with regards to poor risk management and certain other kinds of things, and the ripple effects, and then we will speculate as to what it means regarding the strength of the tech sector, the strength of the banking sector, the strength of the economy at large. Is this a harbinger? Is this a canary in the coal mine, and all those other kinds of things? But something that this is related to is all the different macroeconomic factors that are out there, such as the interest rates, the inflation, and also employment, or unemployment, I should say. And it is the case that unemployment is actually a lot lower in the lower end, or the uncollege educated, where they can name their price, as opposed to the higher end. And this has been true for a while. And now we're seeing it more so even in jobs such as Meta and Google and all these other kinds of things. And we see here a quote from Mark Zuckerberg after chopping off 11,000 heads, which is nothing, by the way. More could be chopped off. And he says, "I don't think you want a management structure that's just managers managing managers, managing managers, managing managers, managing the people doing the work." So at the Black Brain Trust, I listen to your broadcasts over there, and you do emphasize actual, shall we say, product, like actual end goals. These are problems that could be solved, and these are going to be solved by people with skills, as opposed to, go get this particular degree and such. What are your thoughts regarding this decades-long, slow-moving train wreck of people going to college to do BS stuff, when there is no real pot of gold at the end of this crazy rainbow they're being led down. Just a few thoughts on that, and then we'll move on with the conversation on Silicon Valley Bank. Mike V, are you muted? You are muted, or maybe you didn't hear me. Or let's move on to Game Changer to answer that question there. What are your thoughts about what I just said, Game Changer? Okay, so Mike V and Game Changer are both muted. LER, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. So I guess the tech guys are having technical difficulties. Okay, maybe that's why Silicon Valley Bank, maybe they can't get their ish together over there in the tech sector. But okay, so let's move now a little bit closer to the issue at hand. And gentlemen, both Mike V and Game Changer, when you you can just hop in and say yes or one or whatever when you get
can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with StreamYards. Yeah, just to answer your question real quick. Yes, education is important, especially when you're moving into a fourth industrial and fifth industrial society. It's it's imperative that you have to have a highly educated, sophisticated, deep thought, well-rounded group of people within the community. That's the only way you're going to be able to function. That's the only way you're going to be able to survive, and that's the only way you're going to be able to scale. Going to college, and to answer your other point, your other question about the slow-moving blob or sprawl of non-functional degrees. I think a lot of that came out of necessity to try to educate or give access to second levels of education beyond high school, and so to keep people more, busy for all intents and purposes. But that wasn't the totality of society as a whole back then. And so I guess what I'll kind of end with is that Black people are very unique in this, primarily because they've been denied access to education, higher levels of education. We know that Black men, most Black men prior to like 1965 were only ended up with like 8th grade educations, before they went to go work on the assembly lines or other blue collar forms of work. And so we need to have more access to post-secondary education in the math and the sciences. I think that's the start of everything, and then whatever else that you want to do after that is up to you.
Okay, so math and sciences, I say that my ears perk up. Besides the trades as well, which are, so that's a slightly separate issue, because for a different kind of crowd perhaps. But when you say need more access, what do you mean by more access? Well, like what's stopping, to put it starkly, what's stopping people from showing up at Cal Poly Pomona and signing up for that civil engineering degree right now?
The public school system has destroyed a lot of people's ability to understand the core curriculums. I mean, they stopped teaching that stuff. I think after like 1965, they just kind of pulled a lot of that, a lot of the necessary trades and whatnot out. Before, you used to have, at least I'm probably like the last generation. I remember in the 90s we had woodworking classes and stuff like that. We don't have that anymore. We used to have intro to IT, with like MS-DOS 3.1 or something like that. You don't have that anymore. Well, I think not every school system had it. I think there was a lot of mismanagement by certain public school systems that kind of dropped the ball. I mean, we see that in Baltimore with not having adequate heating for classrooms in the winter. We see that in other areas where there's not enough adequate air conditioning during the spring and the summer months. And we saw that with COVID when they didn't have enough viable air filtration system, HVAC systems, to deal with the airborne threat of COVID itself. And so there's just an infrastructure issue. I think it plays a significant role. And I also think that there's also a curriculum issue where how they teach the youth now is not, sustainable for the future.
Okay, I got you. Public education system in the United States, which is tied to property taxes in the neighborhood. The more low income the neighborhood is, the suckier the school is. Generally, you have some things out there. What is your solution? I've heard somebody say before that they would like to tie it to federal, just tie it to make it like the military budget, like it's like the military budget basically. Forget all this kind of local funding of schools. It's a military budget, just like with the schools, because it's a you make it an issue of national security, if you will. But with regards to the problem you pointed out, what is your particular solution to that public education system problem?
I think that it should be federally funded. We spend more on law enforcement than we do on public schooling at the K through 12 level. We spend close to roughly $200 billion on law enforcement, but when it comes to public education, we spend less than $25 billion.
Okay, very well put. I like it.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Because this is always this is one of the arguments, usually from the left, not always from the left, but usually from the left, is that the problem with education is that we're not spending enough money. But if you look at how much money we spend now versus what we spent in the past, we're spending more money on education, but we're also not getting better results. It seems to me that the real issue is that it's the actual teachers. And of course, we know
teachers unions, because when you then bring up teachers unions, if it's the person that's saying the money stuff is from the left, they will not want to hear you talk about teachers unions, right?
Right.
Right.
Well, in what is it? 10%? I think it's 10% of the teachers are male, 90% are female. That's a challenge, especially for the boys. It also makes it harder for the school system to sort of see itself objectively. They're constantly doubling down for stuff that seems to help the girls and leans in that direction. But since I think partially because of a lack of males as teachers, I think that creates a challenge. But what do you think? What do you think of that?
Yeah, let me because I was the one that brought up the whole money thing. Mike V said public school, and then I was the one that tied up the whole money thing to it. And the money thing can be generally, and just for equality, you might want to make it a federal thing, regardless of whether you think you need more money or not, right? I just think that tying it to the property tax of the particular location it might be a little weird. But I want to ask Kaizo to address himself to this question, because he has. So, Kaizo, tell us about that school in the UK and how that lady.
I didn't understand Dr. Thunder's question. I didn't hear it.
Okay, the question, and I'm going to have Kaizo kind of respond to it. Basically, is saying that money is not necessarily the issue when it comes to the quality of education, because we're spending more money, not when you compare it to the past, dollar for dollar, inflation adjusted, and still not getting the quality of education. Things having to do with the teachers. Things having to do with the curriculum, and then the power of the teachers union and certain other kinds of things. One can imagine all kinds of things that have nothing to do with money, right? Just because you throw money into something doesn't mean it'll solve it. And before you address it, Mike V, Kaizo, can you talk about what that lady in the UK did to transform a school? And did it have to do with money, by the way? Go ahead real quick, and then Mike V can take on it.
Yeah, so in the UK, there's a school called Michaela Academy, and there was actually a Afro-Indian lady called Catherine Bubble Singh. Now, anyways, she basically noticed that the quality of education, especially for BAME, Black and Ethnic Minority students in London Borough, was actually terrible. Basically, they weren't being taught. The kids were coming in late every single day. The kids were coming into school hungry. The kids were just not prepared for school. The kids were not able to do homework at home. So the guy, she had an idea. Let me set up one of these academies, right? One of semi-independent schools. So she got together with some local MPs. She kind of lobbied it in order to get it passed through. And I think she's more of a conservative type. She set it up. Now, what she did is kind of interesting. She kind of employed the top of graduates. She didn't employ teaching graduates. No, she employed graduates in their right fields. So she employed the best graduates in chemistry, in physics, in math, in other sectors that she would actually
And
have.
she probably also employed some higher kind of strictures and discipline with regards to
Of course.
what exactly the education scheme is about. And I'll stop you there.
Yeah.
I'll stop you there. So a certain kind of change in the structure and the discipline of education, hiring people and also paying them more. That's where the money comes in. But you're paying the teachers, the right kind of teachers, opposed to paying administration, right? So, Mike V, I'm sure you're kind of
Just
understanding.
before Mike V goes on, I mean,
go ahead.
The results are amazing. I mean, this is just 2022 results, right? They got 91% of all the students got between A star and B. That's incredible results, right? The national average is like barely 40% get A to E, right? So, they're clearly doing something incredible over there.
Yeah. So, Mike V, you wanna take it?
And these are blacks, right?
These are blacks. Baby black.
I'm sorry. Where are we leaving off? Where do we leave off?
Do you have anything to say? Because you don't have to. Anything to say about the money aspect? Is it just money, or where should the money be spent? How should it be spent? What are the structures that need to be changed in the education system, K through 12, to make it more effective?
Well, I mean, I can summarize and say that, there needs to be first of all, there just needs to be more investment, period. I mean, it doesn't make any sense that we're spending this much on law enforcement, but we're not spending enough on public education. That part needs to be solved first. The other part has to be solved is the infrastructure issues itself. If I want to look at it from a black perspective, then we know that, black schools get less funding than white schools. We see that in Chicago. We see that in many urban places where, Olympic-sized swimming pools, Olympic-sized racetracks at white schools, while black schools don't have that. Why is there such disparity in investment in these areas? And so to answer your question about the outcome, the product, you get what you pay for. If you don't invest into these schools, you don't invest into the system, you're not going to get anything out of it.
Okay, fair enough. Now let's move. Okay, vacillating back and forth between the backdrop of the economy, the education system, the employment system, interest rates, and inflation. And then we're talking about Silicon Valley Bank, okay? That bank with the billions of dollars frozen, the thousands of companies affected, tens of thousands of employees, and so on and so forth. Now, I'm going to give 5 quick points with regards to what went wrong here, okay? And they made some mistakes with regards to effective risk management, but nothing as blatant as, what we saw with Lehman Brothers and all that kind of nonsense. It's more of a microcosm type situation where the people depositing the money in there will not be everything checked out. The bank is up to snuff with regards to regulations, right? No problem on the surface. Okay. You have to kind of look under the hood and be a financial expert to kind of see, there's a lot of risk here. Okay. Now, basically they got lots of deposits during the good times, okay? During the time of great liquidity, okay? Up until, a couple of years ago, basically, or about a year ago. So that's point number 1. They got a lot of money. They need to put this money, and this is part of point number 1, they need to hold liquid assets. This is part of the regulations that came out of the great financial crisis in 2008. They have to hold liquid assets. Cash, obviously, is liquid asset, and also certain kinds of bonds, of which U.S. Treasuries are one. U.S. Treasuries, the safest kind of asset out there, because the U.S. will pay you back. They might print money to pay you back, therefore inflate the value of the money away, but they're going to pay you back, right? So they chose long duration bonds, basically 10-year bonds, and so that they can get a better interest rate, which was relatively good back then. But the interest rate was low still. Interest rate was low compared to now, okay? But they chose long duration bonds, and this gave them a duration mismatch. What does this mean? This means that, hey, if I say, hey, Kaizo, I'll pay you $10,000 a month, $120,000 a year. Or Kaizo, I'll give you $200,000 a year, but you only get paid once a year, most people will take the $10,000 a month because it's more of a duration match with regards to your bills and the cycle of life. The cycle of life tends to happen monthly or quarterly max, but mostly monthly, right? Because even if you have to take a loan out against that $200,000 that you're expecting at the end of the year, you have to service that loan monthly, right? What these guys did is they wanted a higher interest rate. They needed yield. They were hungry for yield, so they took 10-year duration on these bonds, okay, which then gave them a duration mismatch because they're in a volatile industry, and they did not hedge for interest rate volatility. You may see where this is going now, okay? Interest rates were low back then. They took this long duration bond, and then bad times hit. Interest rates go up. When interest rates go up and you're holding a bond, these bonds are tradable. You can sell them. That's why they're liquid assets. When you're holding a bond, which has 2% yield on it, and then all of a sudden, new bonds come out that have 5%, your bonds are worth way less. You get the picture? Like you're gonna when you go to sell it, you're gonna sell it for less money than you actually bought it. Okay, so they did not factor this in. This is basically called, hedging against interest rate volatility, because they just thought interest rates have always been very low. They're going to be low forever, right? That was their thinking. This was a part of the mistake that they made. So unless you're kind of like a financial person, you would not. This was not actually an issue. This was what they did wrong, really. Again, long duration bonds having this mismatch with regards to duration, and then did not hedging against the volatility. So then what happens? The bad times happen. The venture capitalists are not dumping money as much, because again, it all started with them getting a whole bunch of money, and then they bought these treasuries. Venture capitalists are not depositing money as much, but the startups are still burning money at a rate higher than the bank thought, because the bank thought, oh, everyone's going to tighten their belts. But no, people didn't tighten their belts, as they often tend not to. Okay, the money is burning out, no influx is coming in, and Jerome Powell jacked up rates on you, killing the long duration bonds that you had, which had the interest rate mismatch anyways, and boom, they started selling things, and they had to report something. They put out a letter last week on Wednesday saying, hey, we're doing this and we're doing that, saying things that you don't want to hear your bank say, like, stand with us in these tough times. You don't want to hear your bank say that, right? And then people are like, hey, dude, people start calling each other like, bro, I got my money out, dude. And then boom, people ran on the bank. And that's how a liquidity problem becomes an insolvency problem. Liquidity meaning, okay, wait, let me go sell my stuff to give it to you. But when everybody rushes at the same time, I can't have enough stuff to give it to you, right? And then there's a risk of contagion, of spreading. So this is the basic 5 points surrounding this. But let me ask, Game Changer, how's your audio there?
It's fine. I was driving earlier. That's why I was having all kind of problems.
Okay, no problem. So, Game Changer, what would you do? You heard the 5 points here that I just gave, right? The depositors did nothing wrong. Okay, the bank did this kind of duration mismatch and also did not hedge for the interest rate volatility because they just thought interest rates were going to remain what they are. No one could have saw it coming, of which we'll talk about this kind of risk, which people tend not to understand. People say things like, "Oh, this was a black swan. No one could have saw it coming," which is stupid. It's not real. It's not true. The real risk is that you created this kind of you put a bunch of kindling, a bunch of fuel. You gathered a bunch of fuel in your basement, okay? Because you thought lightning is not going to strike your basement, right? You're like, it's not possible. Lightning's not going to strike my basement. How could it burn? And then something happened. Some crazy kid got in your basement, played with match, and everything burned. And you're like, oh, how couldn't the risk was the fact that you put a bunch of fuel in your basement? It's not about the probability of lightning striking, which is what tends to happen over and over in the financial sector. It's called contagion. So, Game Changer, you are the regulator. You're Janet Yellen or whatever. Tomorrow, which we're going to hear things being said by the regulators tomorrow, would you help out the depositors? In other words, would you say, hey, depositors, we're going to give you your money back beyond the $250,000 which the FDIC guarantees you? We're going to give you your money back. Because right now, they got $250,000 and the rest is in the air, subject to what comes out after they sell and liquidate the company through bankruptcy, right? Meaning you're going to be getting pennies on the dollar. As a regulator, would you give the depositors their money back? And would you tell the rest of the United States, because there are other people now looking at other banks with a side eye, regional banks like, hey, do these guys got the money in there, right? So in order to backstop the contagion and in order to make the depositors whole, would you guarantee them the money which is taxpayer money? Or would you say, hey, let it burn? The depositors are going to get let the depositors burn with the shareholders and the management of the bank. And let's see what happens with regards to contagion. What would you do starting with Game Changer?
Okay, so I would definitely let it burn in this particular instance, and that's because the whole banking system is extraordinarily flawed, and what we're seeing is the results of a flawed system. Basically, the lack of risk involved in banking and in loaning companies money and things like that, hoping that they'll return with interest, and if they don't, it don't matter because the feds will back you. That type of business model is definitely there. There is going to be a downfall, and we're seeing that now. You say that the people are, accruing risk, and probably not logically, picking their investors or, who they invest in wisely. And that's because why would they when, they're automatically backed? And there's no consequences. So yeah, it's just simply because, and I don't like to see, investors fall, or I'm not just a let it burn for the sake of let it burn. However, other banks and institutions really need to know that there is a consequence, that they can't just bail themselves out every time something happens, or there is a consequence to bad investments. So you should really consider who you invest in wisely.
100%.
Can I ask a question?
Full laissez-faire. Go ahead, Mr. IC3.
Okay. So listen to what you've all been saying, and look, so basically, banks can own insurance companies because the decision to close down the Silicon Valley Bank was made by the FDIC, which is an insurance entity.
Federal entity.
Yeah. So,
but let's not confuse federal with backed by the government. The FDIC they just call it that, like federal.
Just like the feds. You're correct.
Okay. Right. So the insurance company can own banks, and the banks can own insurance companies, and then it's all regulated by other entities, and then you have the issue of revolving doors, where they're trying to maintain trying to maintain trust. So how do you see the impact of racism on all of this discussion? How does that impact decisions being made? How do you feel about that? How does the panel feel about that? Does racism play a part in this or not?
Yeah, let me package the question and direct it towards Mike V. Okay, Mike V. People talk about black banks a lot, and my feeling on it is, okay, what's the difference? Capital is capital. If you're swimming in the same pool, you guys are kind of buying and trading the same treasuries. You're not doing something that's kind of adjacent and thoroughly diversified. And if you're not having different practices with regards to this kind of risk of contagion, and you're not hedging properly, and all these other kinds of things, what does it matter if it's a black face, right? So that's one aspect of it, which is the whole black bank thing. And then obviously, Mr. IC3 here is asking about the revolving door, the good old boys club, of the banking sector, and also racism. You may have something to say about both. Go ahead, Mike V.
Well, to answer your question, what black banks offer is access to capital. We know that during the pandemic, when many black businesses were forced to shut down due to closures to COVID restrictions, when they needed to get a loan or extension for their business, they were usually most likely to be denied. I think at something like 80%. And so many black businesses failed because they were doing business with non-black banks. But black banks offered access to capital and actually more stability, more likely than not. And so the necessity for a black bank, although the systems are the same, the treatment is vastly different. We saw that with Bank of America. We saw that with Honda Financial. Although they're not a bank, they're an institution that lends out money for buying vehicles. We know that they were charging significantly higher interest rates on Honda vehicles, brand new off the lot, to black customers than their white customers, and they settled out for $32 million with the federal government over this. And so what we're seeing here is structural racism playing its way into the capitalist system, where the ability to do business is stymied by these sort of hidden or invisible features within the system itself.
Right.
Now, I'm not going to claim that that's not happening. Part of me wonders about the psychology around that, because if you think about, okay, if you want to loan money and get your interest rate, and that's how you make money as a bank, right? If you want to loan money, why do you care if they're black or white, as long as their credit checks out?
To answer your question, there's something called redlining, right?
Right.
So what redlining did is it outlined these areas that they considered to be of high risk, and those areas most likely, more than not, tended to be black. We saw that with the mortgage crisis. We saw that even in the credit crisis. Most black people were charged higher interest rates on their credit cards. And in the insurance industry, for car insurance, ProPublica put out a piece, I think maybe 2022 or 2021, where black people pay significantly higher insurance rates for the same vehicle in the same areas, or I should say the same states, but just different cities or different zip codes.
Right.
Just real quick. Of course, I know that. I understand that. And so my question is not really about does this stuff exist or not. My question is more about the psychology associated with doing that. Now, I understand that people have bias and X, Y, and Z, but if you're going to make money, why do you care what the people look like? It's more of that question.
Well, let me address that, okay? Because this is the point is before IC3 stands up and gives us the white glove treatment, okay? Now, there's obviously a mix of a couple of things, but I would assume that when people say systemic, it's because it's not about you being Archie Bunker saying, "Yo, LAR, I don't like his brown face." It's about you saying, "Hey, that area over there is risky. I'm going to draw a line around it, and it just so happens to be the area that there are black people in." And we need not speculate about whether you thought they're black people. That's why you wanted to not get, but we know about the correlation between income and race. And then we can argue about why that is and all those other kinds of things. But if I say, hey, that area is risky and I draw a line around it, there's also white people in there, by the way. In red line areas, there's a lot of white people. After all, white people are the majority, right? There's white people in there too, but it's going to be disproportionately black in terms of the percentage of the population. Right. That would be the answer. And I think what you're getting at is it would be wrong to personalize and so to psychologize and be like, oh, that banker doesn't like me. That's why. It's like, no, the banker doesn't know you, and maybe he doesn't understand your neighborhoods. That's part of it. Maybe he needs more awareness as to the nuances of Harlem and the nuances of black neighborhoods, so that he understands that he doesn't just paint with a broad brush, right? But he did indeed paint with a broad brush, and he brushed black people off, right? Okay. So, but the point at hand here is I want to get down to the regulatory thing with regards to what Game Changer said. Okay, we already kind of see the 5 points with regards to what Silicon Valley Bank did and how they kind of set up a risk of contagion. Now, what was the contagion thing in there? Basically, contagion is similar to that thing where I said, well, you're gathering a whole bunch of kindling in your basement, and when one thing fire strikes, everything burns. You could be like, oh my God, I didn't see it coming. It's like, it's not about the off chance that something could light it on fire. Is remove the kindling, okay? So, besides the fact that they did not hedge against interest rate volatility, there is the fact that they're loaning money to startups based on deposits that they're getting from startups. You see the problem here? It's like once one thing goes wrong, everything is just going to go wrong. It's like you're taking money from the same industry, lending into the same industry, depending on the VCs, and it was just kind of weirdly concentrated. So Game Changer has given his answer, super laissez-faire libertarian answer, saying let it burn. Dr. Thunder, and then we'll move through here, Kaizo, IC3, and Mr. Mike V, and LAR. You're the regulator. Do you bail out the depositors? Do you tell Americans, hey, we'll guarantee, don't go run on any other banks? Because you don't necessarily have to put up the capital. All you have to do is just say, hey, don't go run on the bank, and people will not run on the bank, and you don't have to put up any capital in order to presumably stop the contagion, and also because the depositors didn't really do anything wrong. Let the CEOs and the shareholder and the bank itself go down. What would you do if you're the regulator? Just a quick, concise kind of what would you do?
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to let it go down because of all the other ramifications. Who's going to have to pay? Eventually, it's going to get to John Q. taxpayer, and so in this situation, you can sort of sequester, or you can kind of segregate the fallout of this thing by just keeping it sectioned off there, and then hopefully folks learn that they can't, you can't run on the bank like that because it's not going to work out. But
yeah, it's a funny kind of game theoretic thing. It's similar to the Byzantine general's problem in the sense that you don't know what other people are going to do, but really it is the prisoner's dilemma in terms of game theory, in the sense that some people told their startup, some venture capitalists said, hey, let's not take our money out. Obviously, it was a bad decision now, right? Let's stand with Silicon Valley. And as a group, if nobody took their money out, you would not hear anything about Silicon Valley Bank. It would just be sailing along well. But the thing is, as an individual, the right game theoretic thing to make, given the cost and benefit analysis, is to take your money out. Because you don't know what the other people are going to do. And if you take your money out, nothing happens, you're good. If you don't take your money out and something bad happens, kind of similar to the Pascal's wager type situation, then you're completely screwed. So it's a funny kind of thing there. But Kaizo, with regards to regulations, would you bail out the depositors? Would you tell Americans, hey, we got you with regards to any other banks, don't go sniffing around in your bank? What would you do? Or would you just let the chips fall where they may?
Yeah, great question. I think I want to clarify a couple things. Are there many banks, I guess like public banks, that basically you can put the money in there and then they can hold the money for you, almost like one of those safes where you can put gold? Is that a common practice in these banks? Because if it was, then I think that's just what I would do, right? Because
That's a savings and loans is what we call it here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, so they exist. So then why didn't they put the money there?
Because the money that they put in there is not just the startups, but there's many tech companies that put their money into SVB that diversified their portfolio where they put their money. And so some companies put their money in, some companies did not. Some companies had less risk putting their money in there. But for all intents and purposes, they would just park their money into these sort of well-known institutions such as SBV.
Right. So
And
the
also,
issue
by the way, they
really,
wanted to participate in certain products that savings and loans do not offer you because they
right,
were
but that's the issue, isn't it? Right? They were greedy. So it's actually their
yes,
fault.
yes, there is some.
Right.
The depositors that I said are guiltless are actually not. No one is ever completely guiltless. Go
Right,
ahead.
because the reason I brought this up is, for example, right, as a consumer, right, I'll put money in a way that, okay, for example, I'm gonna be insured up to $250,000. Okay, that's great. But if I'm gonna put like up to several millions of dollars that I need to be liquid at any point in time, I'm not gonna be risking it into some crazy banking strategy where they start, trying to give me interest rates back. I just want my money to be in there and to give it back, because if, again, look, I know they're trying to diversify their interest, but if I'm a startup, I think the capital is the main thing there, right? I don't need my money to increase or to keep up with inflation. That's like the least of my worries. So ultimately, I think this is a bunch of greedy people that were trying to make profit, and it didn't work out for them. So there's nothing. I would not bait it out. I think at the end of the day, this is why you need more. You need more crypto.
Nice. Yes, I think you've kind of explicitly stated the complicity of the depositors here, which we've not quite explicitly stated before. Plus, also including the fact that they were burning more money than they should have been burning. In other words, one of the reasons why the banks started running into a liquidity problem is rather than everybody kind of cut, tighten their belt, like Facebook chop up 11,000 people, Meta, so on and so forth. In other words, tightening their belt, they did not. They kept on burning money. Mike V, how would you go about with this regulatory task here? Would you just let it burn? Would you backstop things?
Let it collapse.
We got
Yes.
yeah, okay. Got the
Yep.
laissez-faire crowd in the house. Okay, good.
Yes, let it collapse.
I like it. I like it. I like it. So, Mr. IC3, you vote for collapse as well?
That's right. That's right. Could I address the point
Go ahead. Go ahead.
the professor made earlier about interest? Well, what does it matter? What color does it matter? And I'd like to say that when people are making an investment and they're looking for interest on their money, they don't know how that interest is being earned or developed. And I suspect, I would like the other brother to also expand on how they actually managed to prove that there was racism in the purchase of the cars that you was talking about, the Honda. How did they catch them? I'd like you to expand on that for me. That's very good. Yeah. So to do with interest, I believe that when black people are saving in banks and they feel that they're being clever on earning the interest, but that interest might be earned on projects, investments in projects that are impacting the people classified as black. They're actually investing in, but not unknowingly investing and earning interest on projects that are racist, white supremacist, racist projects.
Well,
Because the bank's not going to tell you how it's earning the interest. They're not going to tell you what they're investing in.
yeah. So we're talking about different types of investments because the way the banks get their money from people with savings accounts and things like that, yes, they do use that to invest in other things. But I think what Ike is talking about in particular is not investment capital that's received from the general population, and in this case, black people or anything like that. This is debt that they're purchasing from the Fed to sell to other people. So it's a different pipeline of capital that we're talking about. I mean, there's several different ways. Now, as far as what you're talking about, I don't really think that it's race specific on who they get the from savings or from other investments from money market accounts or whatever that they use to invest in other things and get greater interest rates. I don't think that they're looking at race when they do that. They look at it as a collective. They look at it as like bulk, because remember, money is what's the word? I'm gonna say liquid, like to where if I pour my cup of water into a jug and you pour your cup of water into a jug and somebody drinks from that jug, you can't say, oh, they drink part of my water. You don't know. It's just like moved into it. That's how they're looking at it. I don't think that it's really much race involved or racism involved, except for the fact that there is, because of the way people think, banks can take advantage of that. For example, someone mentioned redlining or something like that. So if you're dealing with a population that would just as soon not deal with black people, and you move a black person in the neighborhood, and the property value goes down, because everybody who's white want to sell and they're eager to sell, and when you have a group of people selling at the same time, then the housing value goes down in that particular neighborhood. Then absolutely that becomes an issue, but it's not done with malice at all. They're like, listen, if I can move a black person in your neighborhood and you'll sell your home at a discounted price, then I can later gentrify that neighborhood and sell it at an inflated price. That's more fool you, because I'm essentially selling the same home back to you at a greater price because you moved out. That's capitalizing on racism. That's not really creating it or
there is
the claims of it.
There's a general issue with the difficulty with thinking systemically, because people always want to assume a lot of forethought, and it really doesn't matter whether it's planned or if it's an emergent property of the way things are structured. I actually think that when it's emergent, it's easier to solve, because rather than worry about whether they're using the capital for racism or not, you just go ahead and you organize labor and entrepreneur, which are the other aspects of factors of production, such that you can attract capital. And maybe you have to put a white face in front of it, whatever. I don't care what you have to do. But if you have substance behind there and you start attracting capital into your community, let's say, for example, we talk about the circulation of capital within a community, right? That presumably is within the control of the community, right? If capital is not circulating within your community, it's kind of hard to blame other people. But anyways, LAR, and then I want to, Mike V, you may, after LAR responds, you may want to talk about how those banks were caught with regards to the Honda selling and whatnot. But LAR, with regards to regulation, the panel is heavily weighing on the let it burn, the depositors, screw them, they're rich Silicon Valley people anyways. The bank and the contagion, let's see what happens. Let it all collapse. And by the way, one of the things that might happen is you're gonna see a lot of money accrue to some of the bigger banks, which are actually better at risk mitigation. JP Morgan is JP Morgan for a reason. They don't do these kinds of things where they're just going to get a whole bunch of long duration treasury bills, have it mismatch, not hedge for interest, volatility, and things like that. No, those guys don't do that kind of thing. They may be doing some other things, but not that kind of thing. LAR, what would you do regulatory wise?
What I would want to do is let it burn too, but they're going to get a pass because taking into consideration the Silicon Valley and its startups, and if we're going to say technology is the wave of the future for us financially, guess if they bailed out the banks for screwing up and they bailed out the car industry for screwing up, they're going to bail these folks out because this is the path to quote unquote future riches in America. So even if you wanted to let it burn, you got two problems. One, when you said the bonds, right? Who do you think took these bonds out? It wasn't just one or two bonds that made these people go under. It was people who had a lot of bonds worth a lot of money. And they call a friend, they call another friend. Hey, well, we don't care. They didn't already move their money into somewhere else. So they're going to try to overall save the bank or give it to somebody else. I forget which company this was. I think it was Bank of America when they had the financial collapse. When
Countrywide Financial is the bank. Bank of America took it over.
Thank you. But their books were bad. And they didn't really know it was that bad until they got them. You get what I'm saying? So we have a situation where we would love to say, hey man, this is America, right? Capitalism, winners win, losers lose. Now you're a loser. But that's not how America actually works. Certain winners win and certain losers lose. That's how it actually works. So
LAR. Okay. Oh, LAR. You gave the LAR response, which is not to say what you would do, but say what's going to happen because you're the expert of saying what people do. And it's all good. That's we got you here to tell on people. You're the tattletale. Anyways, Mike V, do you want to answer the question regarding how the banks were caught, or the Honda people, for example? How were they caught? It seems it would be easy if you just go and study, interest rates and look at compare it with race, right? I mean, yeah, go ahead. How was it done?
I believe there was somebody who had complained initially about the interest rate on the loan of their vehicle, and I think that kind of opened up the can of worms where I think the Federal Reserve had it's either the Federal Reserve or the Attorney General. I want to say it was the Attorney General. I think it was in 2009. It was during the Obama administration. And basically they asked to turn over the financial records during a certain time. I think like between 2005 or 2001 or something like that to 2010 or something like that. And what they found was overwhelming systemic practices of charging higher interest rates to Blacks and Latinos. Specifically because we know that the Latino community in Honda or Japanese vehicles are very much a thing in America. And so what they found was that there was higher interest rates for Black people. A Black person with a credit score of like, let's say 700 would get a significantly higher interest rate than a white person who had a credit score of, let's say 610 or 620. So they were paying, let's say they were paying up to something like $27,000 more for a vehicle than what they should have.
How do they? I've heard that the insurance companies and banks that they don't register race So how did they do that? Do they have?
They
Yeah.
use zip code. IC3. They use zip codes. So
Yeah, that's
yeah,
why it's redlined. Yep.
yeah. So zip
They're
code.
inferring. They're implying that we're inferring that the people are disproportionately black from certain area codes. So then you don't need to know what they look like, and they don't have to have a name like Don Quavius in order for you to.
For the
Who
Latino
doesn't
stuff, you
use
can
race?
use names, I guess.
Who doesn't use race?
Well, legally they can't use race. To
Exactly.
determine.
You see.
Legally
Yeah.
they
So
can't
that's
use
I'm
race.
wondering how they do it. Yeah.
They use
So I'm wondering why
actuaries.
they couldn't step out of it and
Say
say,
it
look,
again,
look,
LAR?
we're not being racist.
They use actuaries.
Yeah, but the actuaries don't have the information. Is that this person is actually a black person buying
Yes,
that
they do.
car?
That's part of actuaries' job. You got actuaries for your insurance, for for credit. They got actuaries. Maybe the company can't do it, but their actuaries can.
Mhm.
Oh, how's that?
Because the actuaries are the people who calculate the risk. So they need all the information.
But how do they get that information when it's illegal within the banks and insurance are not allowed to classify
It's very
people like that?
legal.
Pardon?
It's okay. Like in insurance in particular, guess what? On your health insurance, they need your race. On your car insurance, they need your race because they're gonna have your driver's information. That's why certain races have different rates than other races.
Well, legally, I think what he's saying is legally they're not supposed to use that as a determining factor, right? But and so in the way these companies, these institutions get around it is by using zip code, because black people are mostly clustered in these zip codes, right? And so I think that is what they're typically saying.
Yeah, I get that, but you got but when you're doing your regular day-to-day stuff, that's part of the info they use. It ain't just your zip code, because it's when you go to the doctor, guess what you got to fill out? When you put your car insurance, guess what you got to fill out? Like all of this stuff that you have to fill out, Social Security information for life insurance and all that other stuff.
Yeah, credit report.
That's where your rates come from.
Yeah. Hold up. Here, so this is interesting. I think you're right, LAR. However, I don't think that I think they're more lazy than that. I think the easiest way to do it is just to do it by zip code, because you're basically going to get the same information, and it's and they found some squirrely ways to do that seem to be obeying the letter of the law, but obviously were shown to be based on bias.
Right, they definitely use zip codes, but they have a way to, like, if you found like your kids would have a different health insurance and life insurance policy than you on price alone, because they'll go by age, gender, because life expectancy, all that other stuff.
Right.
So
but
that's
not race.
Yes,
they wouldn't put race on it.
Yes,
on
they
that
do.
insurance form,
because
blatantly like that.
Yeah, they do use race. They do use race, but yeah, go ahead.
Because every race has a different life expectancy. Every race has different issues. So they use that type of information and they spill it over into all other things.
Right. Crossover, and it's actuaries that are doing that, but not the insurance companies themselves and the banks.
It's just like an accountant for insurance companies and banks. They just basically number crunchers.
Right.
Yeah, and information gathering versus you being allowed to use information for a decision are two different things. The information is out there. Right? They're not allowed. They have access to the information, but presumably they're not allowed to use it. It's like, oh, I can't fire you because of race, but I can fire you because of race.
Exactly. It's confusion.
I did it for something else. So
exactly.
I was thinking about this. Yeah, I was thinking about this. So one of the reasons that you'd want to take your money out of the bank is because you see that there's massive inflation, right, on the rise. Okay, so this inflation's here. If I take this money out and I buy an asset, that asset is going to appreciate with the level of, if it's a good asset, it will appreciate with the level of the inflation. So you can protect your money that way. You're not as liquid, but and this is interesting. I'm sort of, this is a little bit of tongue in cheek. Black folks really, if black folks just did a run on the bank, it would have like zero impact because brothers, they got no money. Our tendency is we're paycheck to paycheck. We just, we spending money on spending rims and stuff like that. And now, yeah, we have a pile of useless, of stuff, too much stuff, but at least we can go and get, some cash for whatever that stuff is worth. And our banks tend to be stuff like the mattress bank, and stuff like that. Anyhow, it's a little tongue in cheek, but but anyhow, go ahead.
Yeah, but how do you support that to say that if black people made a run on the bank, it would have no impact? I mean,
I'm not being 100%. I'm not being 100% on that, man. I'm kind of joking.
Yeah, but it's a very
my point
serious
is,
issue because that could actually be power.
No,
and enable black people to get things done.
Let me backtrack and say this for you. A minute ago when I was talking about the actuaries, if let's just go with the stereotype, we don't have money like that, right? I can get the money out of you. I can get the money out of you if I overcharge you for insurance. I can get the money out of you if I overcharge you for credit. I could get the money out of you if I can overcharge you for all you. Basically, what used to be the black tax has just traveled over to your necessities.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Mr. IC3, Dr. Thunder's point is in line with your point insofar as he's talking about taking your money out of the bank and getting assets which basically mean things that cash flow, such as businesses, property, rented property and things like that. So rather than getting rims, let's say you actually start a business or you buy a piece of land or whatever, that this is the way to actually do it. And as a matter of fact, a lot of high net worth people don't actually deal with the whole FDIC issue. They do split up their money into different kinds of instruments, if you will, a second home, a third home, all kinds of different kinds of complicated deposits and things that do earn them money, so that they're not just kind of concentrated a whole bunch of cash in the bank. Right. So I think that was the first point that Dr. Thunder was making. But I think, LAR finish, and then I think Dr. Thunder wanted to kind of add something. Go ahead.
All I'm basically saying at the end of the day, even with all of this banking information and things going on, earlier when y'all talked about schools basically teach you how to answer trivia. They don't teach you capitalism like that. So the country is based on people not actually knowing capitalism. So all of this stuff that leads to everything that's going to cost you, that's because most of us don't know how business and capitalism work really. We grow up, we go to school, we quote unquote get an education, and 9 times out of 10, what we go to school for, we don't do. Because we don't know how to monetize it, actually. So you fast forward and you got generations and generations of people doing this, and part of this Silicon Valley thing is when y'all talked about the race part is really how the country was set up. Basically, the business of this country is basically set up the way slavery was. That's it. The people in management make the money, the people who do the work make the least. Thus, the comment that he was making earlier about the Mark Zuckerberg managing. That's what was normal for quote unquote white America. That's what the good old boy system is and was. People being overpaid for doing little to nothing, while the people who working for them get underpaid for doing too much. So with all of this happening, what you're seeing, you're about to start seeing, say, upper middle class and people losing their employment, but they got all of the no other business. That's why earlier I said they're gonna basically be mercenaries. Because most people who have high-paying jobs, they get fired and really, quote unquote, don't have the skills because they don't do the work. Guess what they do? Quote unquote consulting, selling business secrets. Or using things that they know in the business that the business ain't paying attention to make money. A lot of white collar crime that sometimes can be legalized.
Woohoo!
I'm just telling what people do. I'm sorry, I'm snitching again.
I like me some white collar crime. That's the Nigerian in me. But
You know what? You terrible.
but I think Dr. Thunder, you were done with your point, right?
Yeah. Well, here, let me just let me make a last statement. I'm gonna get off. It's a good topic. I think it's important for us to understand how these nuances work. This, the banking thing. And my point earlier was really not about. I'm not encouraging, black folks to do a run on the bank. That wasn't the point. It was more of a in jest that in general, black folks don't have the kind of massive capital that we're talking about. So where this sort of scenario could happen with just black people, so that was more of the comment. We do have massive access to resources though, because we spend so much money. It's something like 1.7 trillion every year is spent by black people. But of course, the dollar only lasts for 6 hours or something like this in the black community, and the money is going directly back to, white folks. It's going back to members of the dominant society, all that, and we have to figure out how to fix that issue. As far as protecting your resources from inflation, if that is the concern, then you have to make smart investments in stuff that's not stuff that's risky, but stuff that is going to continue to appreciate, even if it's a very small amount. Just needs to keep up with inflation, at least to get through this sort of situation we're in right now. So anyhow, that's all I have to say. Thanks, folks, for coming through. Make sure you come back and check out Getting Ish Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder. That'll be this Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then also next Sunday for another riveting episode of Case Closed. That'll be 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Yes, 4 p.m., including daylight savings. Yes, we are on daylight savings time. So 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'll see you all later. Thanks again.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Thunder. Okay, now, so moving forward with this conversation here regarding Silicon Valley Bank, we know that what sparked the fire was the interest rates raising. That people could say, oh, we never thought that Jerome was going to raise the interest rates. But the issue was that there was a bunch of kindling in the basement. There was contagion. There was poor risk mitigation with regards to interest rate volatility and all that kind of stuff. Okay, now we kind of started this conversation. We're couching this whole conversation in that whole kind of employment thing, because that's one of a very important aspect of the macroeconomic backdrop when it comes to white collar workers and the fact that they're kind of bearing the brunt of this particular recession. College education doesn't really mean much. Inflation in college education has been going up, but the value has actually been going down. Meta getting rid of people. Mark Zuckerberg talking about, hey, we can't just have managers managing managers managing managers. And now we're going to talk about what does this mean for the common folk. If people follow the do the laissez-faire thing that everyone has been saying, that means that Jerome Powell next week or the next Fed chair meeting is not going to drop down the interest rates. Okay, because one of the things that some people may be anticipating right now is, hey, interest rates are going to come down. Something broke, right? Something is broken, interest is going to come down. It's time for me to go start investing again, which might be something. What I'm driving at is some of the predictions that could be made and some of the ways in which people can take advantage. It is my opinion that this is the time to build, Kaizo, okay? This is the right time to build. A lot of these people, by the way, who got let go at Google, were stuck at Google because Google gave them golden handcuffs, paid them $400,000 a year, so they didn't go start up their own company that could compete with Google in various sectors. So, Kaizo, perhaps why don't you go ahead and just tell them about what we're involved in with regards to, using the blockchain for geolocation and ownership, and what, generally speaking, these days you don't even have to learn how to code per se. The AI is going to help you along with that big time. You're gonna have AI right next to you, like Clippy, the freaking old Microsoft freaking Word thing. It's gonna be right next to you and completing your codes. When you start a code, it's gonna say, hey, this is what you want. And also, by the way, you can have no code versions of whatever app that you want to, just as a test situation. So I would say this is the time to build. Typically, I'm not the only one saying it. This is just the nature of the cycle. Okay. In times like this, when everything is collapsing, everyone is running with their hair on fire. This is your chance, Mr. Black Man out there, or purple or blue or whatever the hell you are. Okay. But Kaiser, what are you doing? What are we building out there in this particular space of tech, if to the degree to which you
Yeah.
can divulge it?
Yeah, great question actually. So I want to backtrack then ask you a question as well, because when I was looking into this banking situation, is that it tends to be that the average banker, or rather, sorry, the average consumer doesn't really know about the insurances that the banks have, doesn't really know about what the bank is doing in terms of using their money to do other stuff. They're just putting it there, knowing that they're going to get some debit out when they need it. So obviously with crypto, one of the good things about it was, well, you control your wallet, right? You control whether it's cold or hot sort of station, depending on which company you put it in. And I just want to kind of put in the thing here, because when the whole Sam Bankman-Friedman stuff happened, people immediately went to crypto, and it has nothing to do with crypto. It was actually the banking stuff that made it go bad. Like the crypto was irrelevant to the whole circumstance. Is that he was doing banking stuff, moving money between accounts and companies, and then investing in something that was already failing. So actually, the crypto stuff is probably the least relevant in actually why the Sam Bankman-Fried situation happened. So I guess my point here is actually people are going to start moving on to cryptocurrencies, because first of all, the American government is not going to be able to insure everybody, because we know how banking works, right? They're allowed to, spend almost, is it 10 times as much money as isn't there? I don't really know the specific. They're allowed to just go and, create things out of thin air. And when people want it back, and this happened before with the crash, right? Whereby people wanted to get out physical coins and they couldn't get it. So crypto, the good thing about crypto anyways, is that it's going to allow some kind of finite money source. You will know if someone is directly investing your money or not, and you can also control whether who has access to that money. Anyway, that's the first step. Second step, to answer your question, crypto is great, right? The stuff that me and Ike are trying to work on is solving some local, or I guess African problems, right? Africa lacks infrastructure, designs, urban engineering. I forgot the official term for it. Urban management? No,
Urban planning.
Urban planning,
Civil
that's it. Right. They like urban planning, right? Well, a simple example is this, right? Most of the houses over here, they don't really have a central base where they have the zip codes. They just don't, right? Everybody creates their own little estates or random houses built all over the place. So there is no centralized database of anything. So one of the apps that we're using cryptology there is actually to design a system whereby, first of all, we go through the APIs of Google Maps, of course. The API will be able to take the local names for all the roads. So we'll start off by simply making sure all the roads are named. It doesn't matter what is named. All the roads will be named. All the dusty little cornerways. That's number
Wow.
1. 2.
Excellent idea.
Yeah, so that's going to obviously improve infrastructure in the sense that, for example, police systems. I don't need to go through all that stuff. Yeah,
Right.
the next part of this whole project is we're going to be able to give every single African individual, even in the slums, GPS validated, basically not just geolocation for statement, but as an actual zip code that's linked to the ID, the government ID. So now this is going to obviously open up a certain level of commerce that's not being able to penetrate in Africa in general. That's just
Right.
one of the
And
examples.
this is
Another
all within
one
the blockchain as so-called NFTs, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's going to be in the blockchain NFTs. And obviously, we're going to the next level about the land appraisals, land buying and selling as well, right? Meta is already doing this within their own virtual land that they'll be selling in their own platform. So we'll be actually selling. Again, we're going to be selling as a service. It depends how we do it, but selling as a service to governments, to private companies, this whole cryptology system whereby, for example, let's say in Africa, common problem is, well, land. the title deeds. Who does it belong to? And this again is just
Right.
Africa. It's also going to be sold in the West, buying houses, selling houses. All this stuff will all be on the crypto. There's an actual database. There is every sale goes through. You don't need a middleman to go and confirm that the money's actually reached the account. If the money hasn't gone there and been validated in a crypto system, it's just not going to go through with the sale. So there's you don't need to have trust, and especially in a dynamic, chaotic environment like Africa, you want things to be seamless. Yeah, so that's basically the stuff that we're trying to make work right now. So Web3 crypto stuff
on the blockchain, fantastic.
Yeah, of
The
course.
government will be coming for you. You're gonna get
The
big.
last part we don't want to talk too much about, but it's to do with voting and verifying certain things. That one is going to be a little bit more stuff which I wouldn't really talk about on YouTube.
Yeah, 100%. And again, we're talking about the opportunities that are out there, and that this is the time to build. Okay, you're not building when there's billions and billions of dollars in the hands of everybody, and everybody is living fat. It's hard to build then. You want to build when everybody else is kind of a little down. Okay,
that's right.
The time that you go in, and also this is the reason why is because the liquidity is going to come back, generally speaking. Okay, and you want to be first in line. You already want to have a product. You want to have something valuable first in line, right there to be like, boom. Give me that liquid, give me that liquid gold. I'm ready to go. I wasn't waiting for anybody. That's why, because capital is always looking for a place to park itself to get that, especially when you're talking about venture capital, because they have to find the next, Google, next whatever. So this is the time, and these are low barrier to entry businesses. But Mr. Mike V, what do you have to say with regards to this stuff, right? I know you kind of touch upon these kinds of things here, especially in the tech sector, problems that could be solved. Do you agree with me that this is the time to build? What kind of examples can people take advantage of with regards to solving certain problems?
So yes, there is an arms race in terms of artificial intelligence, especially with the emergence of ChatGPT. I think that you're going to see many more artificial intelligence platforms start to prop up over the next 18 to 24 months. Who has the best platform and who's going to leverage it best for the needs of their consumers or their customers base. And so when it comes to things like ChatGPT, when you're talking about ChatGPT, you're talking about no code, because you're telling the platform to do something without understanding the underlying infrastructure that goes behind it, all the implementation that goes into it. So that's the no code part. The low code part is where you start deploying it to different platforms to make it work for your applications, such as finance, such as healthcare, and things like that. There's still an API that needs to be binding to different.
And for the audience, what does API mean, and what is an example of an API? Given just to explain to the people.
Basically, an API is an intermediary between how different platforms speak to each other. Platforms that are not necessarily contingent upon each other, but they actually they communicate through this protocol, this application programming interface. And so this serves as an intermediary between these two platforms to make them work, such as like YouTube and an Android phone versus YouTube and Google Chrome and so on. Yeah, StreamYards as well. StreamYards is another platform, Zoom, and so on and so forth. These things require an API to talk to each other. And so now is the time for us to get in. I make a big promotion and advocacy for Black men getting into this, because you don't really need a whole lot. Before coming into the industry, you needed to know like C++, C#, Java. Now things have, the barrier to entry has become lower.
So easy,
yeah, the barrier to entry has become lower, and so now everybody can get involved. And I think that now is the time for many people, and more specifically Black men, to get involved.
100%. So, Mr. Game Changer, I know you like to start little projects that you don't finish. I hope I'm not speaking out of school here.
No, yeah, I do have that habit, unfortunately.
But what are some examples of the things that are out there, problems that could be solved in this space, given the fact that this is a good time to build, or if you can build upon what has been said so far? Go ahead.
Basically, exchange of talent in this space would be one thing that we can do. Another would be combining income, because there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people who probably, if you want to start like home buying clubs. So you're asking like, how could this space be used to benefit Black men financially? Maybe I'm confusing the question before.
And how? Well, more specifically, how people listening right now can go out there and build something within the tech sector with the low barrier to entry and with chat GPT and on this kind of low code and slash no code areas, and solve a particular problem, such as Kaiser was talking about the problems with geolocation and stuff like that in Africa that you can solve using the blockchain and NFTs. Okay, what kinds of problems? Because I know you build certain things. What kinds of problems could you solve? And then you can also bring in the whole kind of like the group aspect you were talking about. Pooling money on like you can raise it up a level also. But go ahead.
Oh, wow. I mean, if you're asking for ideas of how to use this new technology, I really don't have any at this point. And if I did, I probably wouldn't share it. But but no, just understanding its existence and seeing areas of opportunity. Now, of course, what the brother was talking about in Africa, there's obvious opportunity because you have a standard to build towards, and that is the West. So definitely with that, creating a postal system that's effective, and then from there using new technology in order to get things like GPS, then move on to Uber Eats, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, once those things are taken. So, there's definitely money and momentum in developing nations that can be taken advantage of with this new technology. And it is. I think it was China that spent $24 billion in the development of infrastructure there in sub-Saharan Africa. And the US spent 64 billion. So, there are people who understand that you can invest. If you build a bridge and charge a toll for that bridge, you eventually will get your money back. If it's a sound investment, if it's a bridge that people need, or if it's a railing system that people need, or if it's a sewage system that people would use. So there's definitely money in that. But yeah, this new AI stuff, and how could just a general brother take advantage of that? That depends on their own creativity and ideas.
100%. And let me say a little bit of something here with regards to technology solving problems in frontier space, such as, let's say, in Africa and whatnot. Well, first of all, number one, yes, that's where the opportunities are, because the spreading of technology, basically through globalization, is where the money is, right? You create something in the West, right, in Silicon Valley. That's one thing. But then there's so many places waiting for you to spread it into. You can become the Uber of Zimbabwe. Let's say there's no Uber in Zimbabwe or something, right? And there's billions of dollars to be made over there in Southern Africa with the same basic idea. You don't have to invent it. Point is, you're just spreading stuff. There's still a lot of stuff that's still yet to be spread. And the way it tends to happen is in a lower barrier to entry, less capital intensive methodology than it was actually done in the West. If you take telephony, for example, which is just telephones, internet, and all that kind of stuff, the way it developed in the West is cables, hard cables, capital intensive, and wires, all that kind of stuff. How did telephony get to Africa? It was all wireless, okay, which is lower barrier to entry, doesn't require as much infrastructure. Banking, same thing. How did banking get to Africa? M-Pesa and all these other kinds of things. They use more telephone banking, and fintech in Africa than we actually do here in the West, to make these payments. Okay, so you can skip steps is the point. You skip steps. You don't have to go build landlines in Africa. They already passed that step. So when you skip steps, you can solve problems, for example, using the whole blockchain NFT thing, as opposed to some way in which it would have been done in the old days, doing crazy surveying and all that kind of stuff. You could just use Google Maps now, tied to an NFT, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Okay, so having said that,
Africa does have the advantage of learning from the mistakes of the West, and
exactly
the steps that they actually went through, because they seen what worked and what didn't work.
100%. Mr. IC3, in your wildest dreams, okay? In your wildest dreams, and this is, after all, a dream. I don't know that you have a fully thought out plan or even beginning to think about it. Maybe you can start thinking about it right now as I ask you this question. How does one build a financial system that is thoroughly diversified, free from contagion risk, that is parallel banking system, parallel capital source. Mr. Mike V talked about, well, black banks providing capital. How do we broaden this thing to perhaps make it a global system of a different revolving door? Okay, another revolving door where, with the
Right.
banking and the insurance people. Again, I know this is a very broad question.
Yeah.
I just want you to kind of apply your intuition, feel around. What would this look like? Could it look like? What is your understanding? How could it even be possible, sir?
Yes. Wow. This is a tough question. Yeah. To a parallel system, the banking system, that is not perceived as a direct
Crypto
threat to the
banks.
established. Pardon?
Crypto banks,
Huh?
man.
Well, you see, I'm hearing things that the crypto banks and these digital banks, the big banks don't like. They don't want a threat to their plans to a digital world and digital banking, and so I hear that knocking off some of a lot of people that have digital currency. But
Silvergate, by the way, Silvergate Bank just collapsed prior to this Silicon Valley Bank, because Silvergate was in the crypto space. It didn't really make as much of a big of a splash. Okay,
there you
But
go.
Silvergate did collapse.
Remember that lady you did a show on? Sorry, give me a second. IC3.
It's all right. Go, Flo. Keep going.
So African and be rude, but remember that you made a comment on on that lady who was actually addressing some senators or something about like, oh, this is why we shouldn't allow crypto. I have no faith in it and stuff, and everything she said had nothing to do with crypto. It was all to do with banking. Like literally, she was against the fact that banks exist.
Yeah. Everything
Right.
she said was about centralized banking. She was like, oh,
Right.
and this like you're taking customer first. Like the whole point of crypto is none of what she said. She was
Exactly.
just
Yes.
BS.
What Sam Bankman-Fried did was actually what bankers do. It has nothing to do with crypto at all.
Yes.
Yeah, but
so
go ahead. So
Go on.
Mr. IC3, maybe I could push, maybe I can direct your vision to a particular corner of this room, which is dimly lit. It's not even a real room yet. This is the room of that where we're going to create that revolving door with this parallel banking system, and this
Yes.
will have to do with maybe identity, which is one of your specialties. Okay, does
that's
there
right.
have to be a coalition, some kind of idea of an identity? Okay, Pan-Africanism has a bad connotation for good reasons, because
Yes.
they're all full of shit over there.
Yes.
But take for example the idea that there's all this money, trillions of dollars that African Americans, I believe, spend, but it's just like water flowing all over the place, splashing everywhere. Spend 6 hours.
That's
in the
right.
community. It's not being
Not
coalesced
focused.
into this kind of block of ice. It's not focused. And perhaps before you get to the point of, shall we say, creating a system, you do perhaps have to kind of create a focus, and perhaps you do have to get tribal in a particular way, in sense of,
Yes.
well, we are the small hat people, we do X together.
Yes. There you go.
Not
There you
because
go.
of any kind of malicious or crazy whatever. It's just like, okay, well, I want to do this kind of thing with these types of people, so that I can
Yeah.
at least be parallel. What do you think about that as a precursor to even having that revolving door, the identity piece, and whatever else you might say to what I just said?
Okay. So yes. So usually, banking is marketed as something that is not racial. It's not supposed to be racial. Money has no color. That's the popular propaganda that goes with money. And they say, oh, so even the banks, your high street bank, they'll all like to say, look, well, we're like to engage with the local community, and we're banks. We don't have any bias. Yeah, we're just here to provide for everybody and anybody. So the moral high ground appears to be within banking to market yourself as a bank with no racial or ethnic bias. And I suspect that is a delusion, because banking always will depend on the accuracy of identity. And the only way to I'm going to say that the only way for Black Africa and the Black African diaspora to move forward it's going to have to get racial and ethnic.
Okay.
It's going to have to get racial and
So,
ethnic. Finance.
Specifically and it's explicitly identitarian and come out, and it will be shocking to just come out that way fully ethnic. Which, by the way, and I think that there was a separate conversation, perhaps offline, and I mentioned that the idea of being individualist or non-identitarian works for a particular ethnic group because that's kind of the milieu in which they came up. Western Europe is particularly amenable to kind of mixing with these different kinship groups. They're not particularly tribal people, so that philosophy of being an individual and non-identity and all that kind of stuff is actually very well suited to them. It is that identity, okay? But that's a slightly kind of separate conversation there. So LAR, I want to ask you with regards to, we talked before about UBI. We talked about UBI versus skills. Okay, and now we're kind of circling back to it because we're talking about taking advantage of the current situation. Okay, people might anticipate that, hey, maybe the Feds are going to start dropping interest rates again. Maybe they may pivot, go back to zero. So let's go ahead and invest in anticipation of the Fed adding liquidity back into the system. Or maybe people should go out. Now, this is your time to give people advice, right? Not telling them what they will do, but if you were to give your son advice, like, okay, what skills they should learn, things about the capitalism, for example, that you said that they don't know about, things about handling their money, things about taking advantage of the global market system, for example, which exists now. And shout out to Joe Rogan. He says, hey, if you're in America, you're in the balls of the dick that's fucking the world, okay? And there's no reason why you should be you should be taking full advantage of the opportunity, okay? To diversify, globalize, and all that other kind of stuff. So what advice would you give to the common person right now, okay? And you picture whatever the common person is that you have in your head and the information that they're lacking and that you would wish to impart upon them, LAR.
Sell fentanyl in the suburbs and you're going to come up. No, but here's the real thing. Honestly, you're going to have to be on a 24/7 hustle just to figure it out. Inflation is going to smack, because if you're young, inflation is basically making sure you don't even get out of the starting blocks. I would say live poor. If you're trying to get on your feet, live poor. Stop trying to live the American dream fresh out the gate. It's not going to work well. For other people, if you got a job, that's fine. Get a side hustle, that's fine. Get another side hustle, that's fine. You're going to have to do something, because if UBI happens, I would say prepare yourself for UBI to happen, because when it does, you're going to be mathematically put out of ever getting out of that class unless you're born 6'7". That's what they're trying. That's where it's going. So whatever you do, learn how to hustle early. Learn how to actually be a capitalist at an early age, and not a capitalist that spends their money. A capitalist that saves their money.
So SREP says something in the chat, and maybe you might kind of add to this. He talks about, Joe Rogan can say that because he has access to capital or whatever. Like, look, you are the 1% of the world. So people coming from Africa, they're like, what the hell are you talking about? It's like, you are 1%, dude. If you're not taking advantage of stuff, what the hell? You're looking at Joe Rogan, the 0.00001. No, compared to everybody else, you got mad access, mad opportunity, mad access to capital. The little credit card that you can actually get, and I don't know, low-end credit card got $5,000 in it. People are killing themselves over here in the streets of Ghana to be able to have access to that kind of stuff so they can buy a small little car to do Uber with. You got mad advantages in the West. Anyways, go ahead, LAR.
I mean, mad access is dependent on certain people. I think one of the biggest issues, whether it's real or fake mentally to people, is America has a thing where if you're a certain type of person, you can be subpar and be paid as if you're excellent. And if you're excellent, you're probably going to be paid as if you're subpar. So, and I say I just got to be honest. Sometimes it's a sucker move to think, okay, because a person is white, you know, they can win all the time, and because I'm black, I'm gonna lose all the time. That's not actually the truth. The truth is your road is going to be far tougher than theirs. It might take you longer to get there, but that doesn't mean you're not gonna get there. You're gonna get jammed up a few times. But like a person like Joe Rogan, I get what you're saying, because Joe Rogan would be average at everything. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the issue. A lot of times in this country, people see people just like when you say people come, like I know people who come from the Caribbean, Africa, and the UK. And depending on where you're at, it's just like when you're in America and you came up in a poor environment and you see other people, you're like, it's like when we were kids coming up and we saw suburban kids not take advantage of their opportunities. It's like, really? This is how you live and you're not doing nothing? And it's the same dynamic, but the only difference is, and I hate to say this, but it's true. People live in a fantasy about people's work ethic. Like, there are people who actually work hard and go nowhere. You get what I'm saying? There are people who work smart and go nowhere. So this country is feast or famine. You think about, and I'm gonna say it this way: think about all the people who are like, I'm far more excellent as a human being than Kim Kardashian. I'm like, I don't know how can we duplicate something like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there are people who make it in this country and you go, how the did that happen? It doesn't make sense. You know, people selling noni juice back in the day became millionaires. You're like, what the heck is it? What? Okay, can we recreate this? No, like it's not
how it works. And by the way, in the case of Joe Rogan, for example, he was first. Right, he was first guy messing around on his computer way back in the day. Okay, doing streams, you know, just messing around on it. That's why he's where he's at. Okay. Plus, he's also. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. It was because he was a comedian.
Yeah. And I was about to add that he actually had something too, right? But he was there, right place, right time. Also comedian. And quite good at what he does. It's not easy to sit down.
I think Old Man was there before him, right? I remember because I was there in the beginning.
It's not, you know, he's not literally first. There's this other guy. Yeah. There are a couple other people that were kind of top for internet stuff.
I'm not saying he wasn't at the first. Sometimes what we compare it to is, you Joe Rogan, you ain't Dave Chappelle, like you ain't even, you know, ain't
is he a comedian?
Guys, he's a comedian.
I've never laughed at anything he said or any worldview.
That's the crux of the racial kind of issues. It's like,
yes, right.
There are people who are successful. You're like, where did this no talent bum get up? And I'm not saying Joe Rogan is no talent bum. I'm just saying people compare it like that. And like in this country, that's how we compare it. If y'all, Kobe Bryant is up here, but there's a stint where Jeremy Lin hit 5 good games and he was on the same level as Kobe. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? That's the issue here.
And would you agree that humor is a matter of cultural perspective?
No.
You disagree?
Not here. Like, humor is are you funny or not? Like, we have the same.
So
people like
within
Dave,
America,
same as white people.
No. Like, we have the same reverence. Like, Dave Chappelle is up here, right?
No,
Eddie Murphy is up here.
But
George Carl is up here too with us. Like, if you're good, you're good.
Yeah.
That's how we look at it. And he talked about a lot of stuff. I'm sorry.
I see what he's saying.
Kaiser, you're full of shit when you're talking. Well, I know you know that you're full of shit when you talk about Joe Rogan, because if you listen to Joe Rogan's interview with Eric Weinstein recently, and you have, you know, people who studied AI stuff in MIT who cannot even have that kind of a conversation because they would be boring as
you're mixing other stuff, right? Like, okay, like I said, he's a storyteller.
You're talking about Joe Rogan being successful as a podcaster. You don't even know he's a comedian. That's what my point is.
Right. See, I was
he's not the funniest comedian out there, But that
Right.
podcast thing he does, he is very good at it.
You know what
Okay.
he is in African term, we call it griots, right? He's a storyteller. Like he knows how to engage, and he is good at what he does. But the whole comedy part, when I heard about it, I was like,
Yeah, he's not. He's
yeah,
it's not.
he's a griot. He's a poet, right? He's a storyteller.
Oh, right.
And he's
Okay.
good at that.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, okay.
Griot. Yeah.
Now let's go ahead and give our kind of like summations, closing thoughts. Again, we've couched out, this whole conversation regarding Silicon Valley Bank. We've couched it in the macroeconomic backdrop of jobs, of the whole economy, of interest rates, of inflation. Okay. Again, Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, taken over by the FDIC as a result of a run on the bank. Okay. Silicon Valley Bank holds 50% of venture capital funds. A lot of startups have their money in there. Billions of dollars have been frozen. Thousands of companies will not be able to meet payroll. There'll be a ripple effect with regards to the people who service these companies, right? They're not going to get paid. Debts are not going to get serviced, and all these other kinds of things. Silicon Valley Bank did this as a result of mismanaging volatility when it comes to not hedging for interest rate volatility. Okay, they chose long duration bonds. They're giving them a duration mismatch. Basically went for getting paid $200,000, but only once a year, as opposed to getting paid monthly a smaller amount that'll amount to, let's say, $120,000 a year. That's really kind of what it comes down to. Jerome Powell increased the interest rates, and that kind of was a spark that lit the fire. Okay, and the fire kind of just blew up and metastasized, if you will. Now mixing all kinds of metaphors in there, but because they're out there loaning money to startup people by using money that they're getting from startup people, not a great idea, not a great place to be in. But you guys can just coordinate here and give your final thoughts with regards to everything that we talked about regarding the labor situation, the people in having college education, not getting work, right? And all that other kind of good stuff. So starting with Game Changer, and then, Mike V, Dr. K, we'll end up with LAR, just go like that. I'm gonna step out here for a second.
I gotta go, so I'm gonna bounce.
Oh, okay, cool. Peace out.
You go first,
Game,
LAR.
what are your final thoughts?
Don't sweat it. Y'all handle it. Y'all do that. I'm long-winded. So peace.
Okay, actually, because I know Ike stepped away. Could someone repeat the question for me? I was reading that while he was speaking, I was reading that Silicon Valley Bank's clients will get funds. I just got the notification on that, so that was good news for the clients. I don't want anything to happen to the clients because they didn't really do anything wrong. But the bank itself should not be bailed out. But anybody want to repeat the question for me?
Just closing thoughts, I think you saying.
Just closing thoughts on everything you've heard so far.
Okay, so the reason why I came up was when he was talking about managers managing managers and managing managers, and I typed in the chat room that I have 8 bosses. I don't technically have 8 bosses. It's a reference to the movie Office Space, where the guy who took place in 1999, he had 8 bosses. So if he missed the TPS report, he had 8 people telling him that. That management style is in existence even today. The last time I seen it, and I talked to a colleague of mine who was in that management style, he did mention that. He didn't necessarily have 8 bosses, but because each project had a separate project manager, and because of the way his company was structured, the project managers managed the individuals, not the project itself. He had a lot of managers because for each project. It was very weird. So yeah, there is a problem with that particular structure. I think that what's going on is that we have all of these people. We have too many officers and not enough enlisted men. And that's because the educational system here in the US has become far too easy for pretty much everybody. When I went to school, if you wanted to do a paper, you had to actually take pen to paper in order to write it. There was no spell check. There was no Google. There wasn't anything to do that. So, and you actually have to go to the library to, research and get the tools that you need just to complete a paper. And you had to do about 5 essays a semester, depending on the class, for general education. So yeah, but now you still have to do 5 essays. However, there's Google, there's spell check, there's all sorts of things. It's easier to type. These essays only take 30 minutes. So people are taking classes to where, they are only spending like 2.5 hours a semester to pass these classes, and then they continue this process for 4 years, and they're like, listen, I'm educated, I should be the manager. I've seen that mentality play out into the workplace, and it doesn't fly, because then all of the employees are going to say, well, I can spend 2 hours and 30 minutes half a year or 5 hours a year to get my education. Why don't I do the same? And so it's too much. The market is saturated with people with education, and this is a natural response to that. I think Mark Zuckerberg saying, yes, we do have way too many middle management people here, so we have to do something about this, and we do need more people who actually have the skill set to move things forward. Also, giving people management positions on basis of education doesn't really make sense when they are essentially being placed over other educated people. You're kind of losing out then. Somebody says, hey, I should manage a Chipotle because I went to such and such university, and the person working at Chipotle says, I went to the same university. Why are you the manager? So it's a weird dynamic that people are dealing with, this saturation of educated people here in the US. And yeah, it's hopefully this is the tip of it. Hopefully this is like, okay, we're at the tip. It's going to go down from here, and we won't have this problem in the future. So, yeah.
Very well put. Very well put. And before we get to Mike V, there's this super chat that I forgot, that I've been having up here this whole time and I did not acknowledge. Shout out to Dottie Girl, but we know it's Dottie Gal. That's what it really is. Dottie Gal, them $5 super chat. Oh, no, £3, whatever it is. Should be, which £3 is like $5 or something like that.
It used to be, I think it's like $4.10 now.
It used to be. Now, Mike V, what are your closing thoughts on this, which what has been a riveting conversation here about the whole macro? Who would have thought, that we'll be discussing macro economics in this corner of the internet? But Case Closed is where you have the highest level conversations on the most relevant topics. This is what we're trying to do out here. Mike V, what are your closing thoughts?
My closing thoughts is basically that in regards to Mark Zuckerberg's managers on top of managers and managers, I think what Mark Zuckerberg is really pointing out is this hierarchy of staff within an organization, and he wants to go into a flat architecture. Most Silicon Valley companies don't have an org chart because they're trying to remove hierarchy. And so the flat architecture allows it to be horizontal, where the people that are necessary for their core functionality within an organization are the ones that are going to be critical, to the organization's bottom line. And so having all of these managers won't make any sense, and that does make a lot of sense in the long run. Now, in terms of education, I do think that it's very necessary to have some form of education, if not for the social networking aspect. If you don't revolve around some of these, in the tech sector, if you don't revolve around certain demographics and certain people, your social capital is going to be significantly lower. And so you're not going to be able to engage certain demographics of people or certain venues because you just came from the wrong area, or you just didn't participate in that area to begin with. And so I think that there is some cleanup that's going to happen over the next couple of quarters in most organizations, restructuring as well, unless something else critical happens. And in terms of the overall aspect of Silicon Valley Bank, I think that it's just one of those things that they should have had better oversight of what was going on, and they should have had better controls in place.
100%. And regulators are always late by definition in ways it tends to happen in, shall we say, democracies, or I don't know if it's a law. It's just the way we see it happening in democracies, especially in the United States. Regulators always come up to clean up the blood on the streets after the fact. They're never there to prevent it. And, that's the way these kinds of systems work. And perhaps it's for the best. Perhaps it's best that they let things happen and then retroactively, or in retrospect, I should say, come and address it. But thank you very much, Mike V. You guys should go and check out Black Brain Trust. Okay, he's been pumping out some good content out there. Black politics, black tech, all that kind of good stuff.
There's a racist theory called the neuromelanin. Apparently, it makes a black brain low IQ. It's written by Ghanaian.
Well, I don't have to worry about that. You see, I'm super high IQ, super light skin. I'm gingering it up over here. So
yeah, we'll be covering a stream in about a half an hour or two, about the next 25 minutes, and so covering African tech as well as Black boys in tech. So
yeah, feel free to drop the link. Drop the link. Cool. Yeah, so go over to the Black Brain Trust. Go join the continuing conversation on substantive issues, ladies and gentlemen. So first, we got Mr. IC3 in the building. What are your closing thoughts? This is your second appearance on this platform.
Yes, thank you very much.
General thoughts so far, and closing thoughts, sir.
Yes, well, actually, I have a closing question, and the closing question is: I was very impressed by you, Ike, and Kaizo's plan from the little bit that I heard. But how can you focus your success for the benefit of Africa, for Black Africa and the Black African diaspora? Would your success result in what you've built being bought out by? How are you going to resist of other entities, or are you going to use that success to focus to build up Africa and African diaspora? How does the race and ethnicity impact the plan that you have? So that's my closing thought.
Closing question, and I'll address it. First of all, shout out to Snuggles.
I think Snuggles is going through a recession.
She's going through a recession.
Now it's $2.
She used to give $5. That was her trademark. Now it's $1.99. She's out there tightening the belt. Maybe she's doing the right thing. If Silicon Valley startups would have done the right thing,
austerity, man. She's on austerity.
Taking austerity measures, they might not have seen all the liquidity drained out of their bank, their precious little bank over there. But I'm going to start out by answering this, and then Kaizo, you can give your answer. Your answer is going to be a little bit more dishonest. I know how you are. But the thing is this: if you see the problem that we're solving, then your answer is already in there, right? It's like we're solving a massive infrastructure problem that has the opportunity to unleash all kinds of commerce and to make the life of the average person out there, maybe ordering a delivery stuff, because now the delivery service is going to be more efficient and hence cheaper because you have a codified geolocation system and whatnot. Mm-hmm. The issue of corruption when it comes to land deeds and all those kinds of things, transacting in real estate becomes easier, and all those inefficiencies get kind of leveled out because it's an NFT. Now this handles the problem of ownership as well, which is the same thing I'm talking about in terms of land deeds and whatnot. You're empowering people in terms of ownership, so you're giving the power to the people. This is one may look at it as a very Adam Smith capitalist type of answer, and also very kind of but that's the way I tend to look at things when it comes to because you do things in accordance with your personality. I'm not the kind to explicitly sit and think, how am I then going to coordinate this with a group? It's like, no, I'm out here solving this problem for you. Other things I'm doing, let's say in Africa, building apartments complexes, and I hire Africans, for example. All my employees are Africans, the engineers that I hire, and all these other kinds of things, right? So I need not think too much about how it's, how I'm quote unquote helping. As a matter of fact, I whinge a little bit if I were to think that I was doing it to help. It's like, no, I'm doing what I'm doing, right? So Kaiser, go ahead and give you a BS answer about brotherhood and whatnot.
Yeah, actually, it's kind of yeah, actually, it's kind of crazy that Ike doesn't have to say, oh, he's identitarianly Black or something. Ike just kind of lives it that way. I think his worldview kind of just coalesces and finds all the leverages that he can by leveraging Black labor, right? Anyways, so in my answer, this stuff has been thought out. We've actually spent hundreds of hours talking about how we're going to take over Africa, how we're going to build an empire. That's why I started my YouTube channel, the Kaizoran Empire. So in terms of
Right.
us being bought out, it's very unlikely. Simply because we don't really need money, right? And actually, the pursuit of money is way more interesting than the actual getting of money. So at the end of the day, now obviously they could try to get rid of us and unalive us, but that's part of the game, right? We're
Right.
open to it. We're gonna see what's gonna happen. I won't sacrifice anyone just right now, so we'll see.
Maybe later. But yeah, I think that was quite true to what you said, Kaizo, with regards to, it's like, no, our egos are not so small that it's just gonna end up in. It's like, no, it's like, yeah. I hope that answers the question there with
Yeah,
regards to the
okay.
smallness of egos. This is Moses-like endeavors that are going on here with massive egos that don't
Right.
get easily bought.
Right. Excellent.
So what do you,
Great.
that was your closing question, and then Kaizo, your closing thoughts, encapsulating everything that we've discussed, and then we'll put this episode in the bag.
Yeah. So, well, in terms of this whole situation, to be honest, I don't even think the banks really did anything crazy here. I don't think they did anything wrong. I don't think the investors necessarily did anything wrong. I just think this is what banking is. This is literally what banking is, right? They take money,
That's
they
right.
start doing stuff with that money to create so-called value, leveraging interest rates. And it is what it is. I think this just happened because it was a time, the chaos and everything. So with the risk mitigation, at some point in a system called banking, these things are bound to happen as they've been happening since the fiat was introduced. So I think ultimately, when you're able to have more debt than money in circulation, right? There's more global debt than money in circulation. You realize that all of this stuff is just how the system functions, right? The geopolitical governments will tell you, hey, look, for you to grow, you need to print money. And for you to print the money, you need to borrow money. And for you to do that, it's going to allow more spending so that more value and service is exchanged so that it can even create more value than the so-called money, right? That's the basic principles of economics. So ultimately, I don't think this was a unique case. It just happened. And I don't think there was really things that they could have done. I think ultimately, this was the best strategy that they had. And as Ike mentioned earlier, JP Morgan is JP Morgan for a reason. HSBC, Barclays are these companies for a reason. These people are tied to real assets, and they also diversified their hedge funds. It's not just like, okay, focusing on bonds. No, these people own gold. They own, shares in oil companies that they actually have direct links to. So they would be able to actually sell off something without losing value enough to actually keep the cash flow going on. My point here is that when it comes to this, ultimately, with IC3's banking for black banks or something, I think ultimately, I think SREP mentioned earlier, having a hard limit on the money and finding a more sort of creative way to incentivize service, right? What I'm trying to say there is, right, obviously, the reason people print more money is to get more money in circulation so that people build more, right? But actually, there's other ways that we can be explored of building value while actually having a hard limit on your finance and not just living off debt and credit.
Very well put there.
Yeah.
Very well summarized, ladies and gentlemen. And again, as usual, this is the place where you get the highest level conversations on the most relevant topics, ladies and gentlemen. And we just concluded this conversation about the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. Okay, we're talking about billions of dollars, tens of thousands of employees. We'll see what will happen with regards to the regulatory response coming on Monday. What's Janet Yellen going to say? Is Jerome Powell going to pivot? Probably not. This is not enough of a systemic issue. This is not exactly what he wants to see, because he's going to need to look at the CPI, which is the inflation numbers, to see if the inflation numbers, which he's trying to curb by raising the interest rates, have changed enough for him to change his approach. As a result of trying to curb inflation, raising the inflation rate, there was a spark, okay, that lit this fire in the dropping of the value of the bonds held by Silicon Valley Bank. Silicon Valley Bank did not adequately mitigate against the risk of interest rate volatility, holding these bonds, which are long duration bonds, giving them a duration mismatch, all of which we described. And we all kind of couch this conversation on certain macroeconomic factors having to do with employment, whereby the college-educated people are people facing the brunt of the recession for reasons which we understand. Okay, college education has not been delivering anything, especially with regards to skills to people. People go and get crappy college educations. It does not offer the insurance policy that it's supposed to offer. Okay, they go get educated with liberal arts education as though they're liberal arts education is for if your parents are millionaires and billionaires. Okay, if you already have a slot that you're going to get fitted into and you want to be a well-rounded gentleman scholar, that's when you get a liberal arts education. If you're broke, you're going to end up at Chipotle if you get a sociology degree. Okay, that's where you're going to end up. Or, you know, hopefully maybe you are a particular minority group and you end up in a diversity and inclusion place or in the marketing department as a diversity and inclusion hire, okay, in the HR department somewhere. But this is not sustainable. People need to go back to actual skills. If you're going to go to school for engineering, go to school for engineering with the idea that you're actually going to go and engineer something, as opposed to, oh, I'm going to end up in middle management somewhere, because as Mark Zuckerberg said, we cannot sustain a situation, and I believe that Mr. IC3 kind of mentioned that we're not going to be able to sustain a situation where it's just going to be a thick layer of middle managers managing nothing when the real work is getting done in the Philippines or by some remote worker living in Tennessee somewhere where it's cheap to live. It doesn't make any sense. That's not what capital wants to do with its capital. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, until next time, Sunday 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it'll be in Dr. Thunder's channel next time. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to Snuggles. Thank you to the people who super chatted. Thank you for those who participated in the chat. Go ahead and check out the Black Brain Trust. Kaizo, if you want to drop your channel as well, because I believe there's some people are in love with misogynoir in the chat. They miss old misogynoir and they want to go track him down to what he's doing these days. Go ahead and check out Kaizo's channel. Ultimately, we said that this is the time to build. There are many problems that can be solved. You're living in the belly of the beast where you have access to capital more so than the world. You're the 1% of the world if you're listening from the West right now to my voice. And there's lots of opportunities when it comes to the spreading of technology, otherwise known as globalization. You can go out there and you can leverage the arbitrage in terms of labor, which is something that I'm doing. That's a great competitive advantage that I have in my business, okay? I'm located in the Bay Area. That's my business. I'm currently located in Africa right now, but business is located in the Bay Area, but I'm not paying my employees Bay Area salaries because they're not in the Bay Area, okay? Why? Because in the United States now you can leverage globalization. The Apples of the world have done this. You know, they moved their manufacturing all over the world but now you can do it because technology has made it such that this kind of leverage is not that very difficult to do. Go to Upwork, go to Fiverr, hire somebody, a personal assistant to collate this and compile that and do research for you and pay them $5 an hour and become more productive, build something, okay, actually do work as opposed to thinking that you're just going to get into a track and people are going to hand out things to you. But until next time, peace. We are gone.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what draws behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons will breach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. Hey, I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising and hearts are compromising, convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest and the righteous in your corners.
Mr. Selector, keep coming with the grooves and rhythm sweet as nectar. I come feature this one again, Mr. Selector. Keep coming. Keep spreading niceness upon the land and we'll respect ya. The people on the pavement, they attempt to measure, while the faceless masses will begin